We are live. This is the 12 Puzzles podcast. There's Mark, Alan, and Douglas in Western New York. How y'all doing, guys?
Doing good.
Good. How you doing?
All right. Where are we going to start at tonight? Who wants to do what?
Hey, let's start out what they did at that meetup.
The meetup. Okay.
Yeah.
We can.
It was a Cleveland meetup with John Jude Palancar, Kit Palancar, Brian Zinn, Andy Abrams, and I watched part one. The guy, he's a reporter in Cleveland. He did the story when Brian Zinn found the box in Cleveland. JJP, I think, actually gave out some good information.
Yeah, I agree.
He talked about deception. He talked about how they covered up some. He didn't say what painting, but he said how they had to cover up something because Byron thought that would give too much away. It was something that I think Palancar added himself. When Byron saw it later, he was like, "Nah, you got to take that out."
Castillo de San Marcos.
I think it was Montreal where they covered up the floor.
Yeah,
People wouldn't think that was New Orleans. And in Boston, he said Byron wanted to put the what is it, the USS Constitution that's out there in Boston Harbor?
Yeah,
like a silhouette of the ship, and he told Byron that will basically take everybody to one spot, and they'll be digging all over the place.
Yeah.
So they removed that, but he left the banner flags of the ship on her sleeves in the Boston painting. He talked about the deception.
Eric, what was it about deception? Like what it was like? Yeah, could you just frame that? I haven't seen any of it, by the way, so I'm totally dumb. What happened?
It's like when it says Jefferson and Monticello from Milwaukee. Yeah, I'm not even sure if Milwaukee is actually the correct city. That puzzle's got to the point where it's starting to annoy me. There's too much stuff.
Was he talking about the verse though, or the paintings in terms of deception?
He didn't specify. I mean, deception would be just like you came to a crossroads and it makes you go, oh, no. Brian Zinn did bring up something. He said the L that was on the bell that was making people go to Philadelphia. But he said the L was Liberty Road before they changed it to MLK. And that's the story where John said he called Byron and said, hey, they changed, I don't know, Liberty Avenue or whatever to MLK, and Byron said, oh, that's good, it'll make it harder.
Okay.
So
he wasn't talking specifically about things he did in the paintings.
The deception in the painting is it's Liberty Bell, which makes you go to Philly, but it's really Liberty Road that's behind the Greek Gardens. That's exactly what the deception is. It's making you go. It's like the California puzzle makes you look at LA, and San Francisco is kind of hidden, but eventually you come out across it, and there's a smattering of other little city. Berkeley's a little bit mixed in there, so which forces you to decipher clues in the book to figure out exactly where it's going. Yeah. And not everything's in the words. Some of it, that's like my baseball theory for San Francisco. Everybody's like, where's it at in the book? I was like, it's on page 89 on his jersey where it says San Francisco Giants. And then on the poster behind him where it says New York. It's a visual instead of, an actual something hidden in the words or something misspelled or something put in Latin.
Yeah, and if the cast is not at the capstone in Charleston, and that's May 1913, and that's a line in the verse, that's misdirect. That's a mislead.
Well, is that what I think he taunts you, right? He like hangs these little shiny objects in front of you. Hey, you want to go and chase after this? Come on. But you're just going to take you to the wrong place.
I think it's more about how much do you want to learn, right? So he's a teacher, right? Yeah. And it's all about how much time do you want to put into this puzzle? How deep of a rabbit hole do you want to get into, right?
Yep. And Byron knew everybody that bought the book was not willing to do that. It's either you don't have time. In '83, we'd all be going to the library. You know,
Well, I
so
think he might have overestimated actually the people he thought that were going to have time, because it would have been a hit otherwise.
and we just lost Mark. Well, it's one thing that I found in the book 100% is there's clues to the state, the city, and the puzzle. May 1913, that puts you. I mean, there's two sides of that story. You have the bombing of the USS Maine in Cuba. Obviously, it's not there, but the
Yeah.
cap stands in White Point Garden.
Yep.
So those are two. That's 1,000% in Charleston. That cap stand, USS Maine,
Yeah.
1,000%.
I agree.
But does that mean that's the park? No. But it doesn't
I
put you in
think it is.
Charleston. Exactly. It's a confirmer of the city.
Too obvious. That would be too obvious to say. To put
Yeah,
that
yeah.
in matches and like, oh, it's right there. You know, just
Hey, people, that whole place is already. A lot of people don't realize that whole place has already been pretty much GPR'd. Josh Gates, they did a whole bunch of searching out there, and there's been
I was
other
there.
people out there too. And it's the same as Fountain of Youth. That entire property has been GPR'd, and now everybody thinks it's underneath this palm by this tree. And it's like, what's the one chance it's over there because we searched everywhere else? No, it never was
It's
there.
still over in the Fountain of Youth, they think.
Yeah. And in the
I think
rules
that's
of the
great.
book, no private I talked to Ben Asen today, and I got talking about that private property. He said Byron would have not broken into any place
Absolutely.
after hours. He's a Boy Scout. He said he wouldn't have done that. And that's another trick. You know, it says no private property of people of this book. He's just saying no private property, period. No Wright Brothers Memorial. And that's why it's on the beach outside the Elizabethan Gardens in Roanoke, because you got the Waterside Theater where people got arrested last year. And you got the Elizabethan Gardens. They're both private properties. That's why it's got a back gate. So Byron's telling you go through.
Wright Brothers isn't private.
It's a national monument. That's
It's
worse.
still federally protected.
Yeah, now you're working with the feds.
Well, but he doesn't say it's
And
not.
someone's been arrested there too. So
Yeah.
He never
Yeah,
says
most
it's
of the
not
time.
a national park. He says it's in a public place.
yeah,
Yeah, but not a national.
I mean, if
not
it was
a
in
federally
Yellowstone,
protected
you could
place.
probably dig it, but not out at the federal. I mean, you got it's like the fort in St. Augustine. You don't see them, but a lot of those federal park rangers are walking around.
Yeah.
What was it last summer, the summer before that, where the guy is out there with a shovel, a metal detector, and a backpack, and he's actively out there on the west side of the fort. Beep, 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 beep.
But you got to
Hands
remember,
up,
in
goodbye.
1980, the world was way more wild, right? I mean, you could walk in anywhere and kind of do anything.
These places have been national monuments since the 20s usually.
They have. I'm just saying, if you
You know what I mean?
really study the old pictures that, like the Wright Brothers,
Absolutely.
the Battery
I don't
Land
think any of us don't.
next to the Golden Gate Bridge, these are wide open, wild places. People can, do anything they want in these places. Now it's like, oh, there's a camera everywhere. There's,
I think you're underestimating the 80s. It's a dangerous time too.
I was alive back then. You weren't.
Oh, I was too.
Yeah, because I know there's park rangers walking around.
I think we all were.
I remember being out there, and I got a picture. I'm probably 9 years old with one of the park rangers out there.
Where is this?
This is in St. Augustine around the fort.
Oh,
And I think they're just really there to keep people from defacing the stuff, and you see what's going on with a lot of the protests and stuff. I think it was the Columbus Circle the other day. They got absolutely destroyed up in their spray paint and everything. They got there pretty quick and cleaned it up, but
hey Douglas, you're about 35 years old. What are you talking about? That you're?
I'm 42. Going on 43 in 10 days.
You were in diapers when this thing started, okay? I'm just
No,
saying,
that doesn't matter.
Yeah,
That doesn't matter. I have history to look back on, and I also have family members that lived back then. I interviewed about 50 people from the 80s that live right next to White Point Garden.
I know.
So
I'm just saying, I was
can't
alive
underestimate the
during
hustle.
this period, man.
well, that's another clue that John gave everybody from the meetup when him and Byron are talking about that's making it too easy. So the capstan, you got to think about the capstan out there in Charleston. That if that's the place, that's just why'd they do that? 'Cause that's just too damn easy.
The clock hands aren't pointing there
Well,
either.
the thing is misdirection. It's actually on the other side of the park. That's why it's there. Exactly what he said. Misdirection. Those are real images that he's saying are misdirecting.
Well, you see the capstone and you see King behind it. You see the lion's nose and you see King behind it. So you got to be on Meeting Street side, or you got to be on East Bay Street side.
See, it's not always necessary because I did my homework. I know what White Point Gardens looked like in 1981.
Is the capstone.
Okay.
The lion's nose is the capstone. That's
the fact of the matter is, there was a place the only place that was full of sand, that was only sand and had park benches on it, was the point at King Street, because the Fort Sumter house took care of it back then, until the Hugo, and they put all the eroded soil, probably at 85 too, because they redid the park at 85.
What is different about White Point Garden from when the book came out to today? Most of it was
dirt sand. Honestly, the whole place was kind of sand back then. I'll agree. A lot of dirt, not like it is now with all the grass. All the fountains were broken, all of them. There's no running water to listen to the birds with. You hear the birds for sure. That hasn't changed.
That's what I think about that. Because if you dig down a foot and a half, you're in the sand anyway. I think
it was broken down. The thing in the middle, broken. The pavilion thing, totally broken. Used to be a stage.
Yeah, they raised it like 6 foot and then lowered it back down to like 3 foot. Yeah.
That's right. Really? And when Byron was there was also remnants, or the whole thing of the pier that was on King Street, the King Street Pier. Nobody talks about that. That place used to be a Navy base, Fort Sumter House, an official Navy base. It fits all the things, just like everybody else's. There's no, people fit a lot of things to this stuff, and it works a lot of ways. But if he's going to say Patriots Point because it's a Navy thing, that was a Navy base with an actual pier that took people to Fort Sumter for tours. That used to be one of the main hubs, not Patriots Point, to go to Fort Sumter.
Yeah, and the Navy caused a big riot back in 1919 against the black people or African Americans here in Charleston. And so I would not think that this puzzle is about the Navy, right? Because it's about African Americans.
I understand what you're saying.
the clues, I mean.
Oh, Mark, you're there. We lost your video.
Yeah, I know. I'm eating my sandwich. I didn't want to be rude.
But you do go to Patriots. I
was about to remove you.
Baby. I'm going to hear you.
Well, with what you guys just said, everyone knows I'm in the book. I never found anything to Patriots Point, and the only thing I could tie to White Point was the capstan. I couldn't find another thing in the book.
Well, think about this
at all that says White Point is it.
Hey, Alan is not up on the pro book approach, so we don't want us talking about stuff.
A lot of people don't use the book.
Look, the thing with Charleston, okay, is number one, I have clock hands. Okay, you all don't. So
what?
I have clock hands pointing to Patriots Point.
No, I got clock hands.
I'm sure.
There's nothing.
They've always been pointing.
So all I'm saying is, now Alan says, yeah, I'm doing that too, but you're going past Patriots Point, I think.
No,
so
the only reason why.
That's the first stop. That's the first line in the verse. It's on the.
Okay, so there's only one reason.
Of all the romance.
I don't like that because it's not a new theory.
It's what?
It's not a new idea.
What is
that? The clock hands point to something, and it couldn't be reproduced in any of the found ones. So that's where I stand.
But that's 3 puzzles. So, I mean,
that is more than 25. I mean, that's like, a good amount of the puzzle.
Well, for Charleston, it's not just a clock; it's a compass because it's got white points on it.
It happens
The,
if you
the clock
align it.
lines up exactly
align it.
where the treasures. Cleveland is a point of view. So Byron's telling you to stand a certain point. It says like you're hopping upstairs. There's a road behind you. So 3 o'clock's where it's found because you're 6. Your point of view is 6 because you're looking at the wall.
I'm just saying,
on the right side.
Patriots
So
point.
3 o'clock. That's where the cask was.
Patriots point. Sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
And in Chicago, if you're looking at the fence, and I asked Rob, I said, was it over to your right somewhere? If you were lined up right with the fence like this, looking at it, and it's over here. That's 5 o'clock. The fence is 9 and 3. You're 6 at 5, right there. But Pound Car said that at the meetup today too, which was very interesting. He said the three easiest ones were found, and that's because we have the visuals. He even said the home plate on the sleeve of the witch in Boston was Byron's idea. So you can see one's big, one gets smaller. I mean, the fence was so prominent. The Greek garden walls were not exactly like they are in real life. They were condensed. And then home plate got even smaller. Possibility, the remaining 9 puzzles, there is no visual. You know, maybe that's only a trick you use for 3 of them, just to make them. Once you got there,
let me ask a question: can JJP actually say stuff or not? What do you guys think? I think he can. He just chooses not to.
Yeah, he can't.
Yeah. He talked about that.
He's got to know. He pointed out where Boston was. He pointed out exactly how to get to Boston.
Yeah, he can talk about the found ones. He can't talk about the remaining ones.
Yeah, exactly.
So Douglas, yeah, so you got to think about this, right? Put yourself back. Byron took these pictures, I believe, from the dig site because he was doing 12 of these, and he had to have some. You know, it's not like on his phone he can say, "Oh, I'm going to drop a pin," because they didn't have that. So, you know, he was taking pictures of the area and what you would see, and he's sending these to JJP to say, kind of, represent this in the paintings. So, for example, if I'm saying Patriots Point or I'm saying the Golden Gate Bridge, undoubtedly he would have sent pictures of that view to JJP. So JJP is not going to know exactly this, within this 2 foot by 2 foot, but he's going to know these spots probably within 10 or 20 feet.
Oh, so, yeah, absolutely. He knows exactly where they are.
He has to. To.
You got to understand, for Charleston here, BP came to White Point Garden to see May 1913 on the capstone. All right. So the way I get it is BP had the location picked out before he even come to Charleston. Right. He come to Charleston to take pictures of the area and make the path. All right. So he had to go to White Point Garden to see May 1913 on that capstone.
But how do you know that's the right reference, though? I mean, it's on there. It's there, and that's interesting.
It matches the lion's nose. I mean,
well, maybe.
That's the problem I've always had.
I said it didn't for so long, right? For so long, I said it didn't. I did not want it to be White Point Garden, right? And I started my hunt in Marion Square, right? But I had to start all over. I had to understand how they found the start. You have to understand how these puzzles find a start, and that's by using the Eichel/trick. That's what nobody gets, and we're missing that it's 2 paths to the treasure, not 1. It's a path to the treasure, to the part that has the verse, and you see the verse from there. So you read the verse, you get to the end line, White House close at hand, and you see the verse from there. You should see Of All the Romance Retold from there, the very first line of the verse.
Says who, though? Where you
look at? You have to look at the Eichels, right? All right. So look at.
Explain what an Eichel is, so everybody knows.
Symmetrical. Charleston is symmetrical. Boston was optical, Chicago was mathematical, and Cleveland was logical. It was reversed, right? You don't have to reverse the order of the verse itself, but you have to reverse that one line to dig on the right side, to dig where the cast was, right? Not only that, when you're standing at the columns, the perspective is backwards, right? The columns are small, the wall is big, right? The columns should be big, the wall small from where you're standing. So the perspective is flipped. So is longitude and latitude is flipped. So was the building upside down, right? So we're overlooking the clues themselves. Right.
So how do you know to reverse this, like this verse, that you have to see the beginning of the verse from the dig site? I mean, how do you surmise that? I don't.
You'll get to that once you learn that the Eichel is hidden in the way JJP does the clues themselves. Right. If I look at one puzzle and I see the clues they have an Eichel hidden in the clues, right, and then I look at Charleston. All the clues in the Charleston painting are symmetrical. The lines, nose, the wings, everything is symmetrical. San Francisco, the clues are mirrored, right? Boston, all the letters are here to see. It's visual, it's optical, right? Chicago was mathematical, right? And you used a trick on one line and you used the Eichel on one line, right? And to find the start, your start must be the Eichel. Your start must be, let's say Charleston is White House close at hand. The White House is symmetrical, right? So that's your symmetrical start, right? The or lines is what you do the trick on and the Eichel on. The Freedom at the Birth of a Century or May 1913 is your division, right? And your Eichel is symmetrical. You make 8 symmetrical, that's 4, right?
I don't know, man. I
know, but
it sounds
when you take that template to another puzzle and try it on another puzzle, it works, right? Even JJP talks about this Eichel, and nobody's looking into it. And that's it. That's.
I don't remember him saying that.
Did he mention that at the meetup?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and that's where I
listed off a couple.
Did he use that word though?
The spelling of that word
seems very complicated.
ICAL. It's just.
I agree with Mark.
Yeah, Google's just showing.
It is very complicated.
Calendar.
Very complicated. But if you look, whatever city you're working on, if you look at the last lines in the verse, you should be able to figure out the Eichel, right? And if you follow the path, you should know the Eichel by the time you get to the dig site. It's very, very hard.
So here's something else I want to throw up for Patriots' point. Okay,
I can show you for Charleston. I can show you how to find a start. I can show you how to the whole path. I can show you
Pirate House. I think it starts Pirate House. I mean, he was an author. Treasure Island is a super famous book. It's a classic.
Treasure Island's how you find the start, also, and it's how you.
Pirate House would seem to make sense. It's mentioned in Treasure Island, and so you start downtown versus. But think about this, okay? We all know, I think, Byron has an affinity for the military figures, right? Ships,
history.
Yeah. So so you've got this huge ass aircraft carrier that no one's ever been on before in 1976 or so that comes to Charleston Harbor. This thing is like the center of attention. So you're telling me a guy who loves the military and all the history and everything like that is not going to be drawn to this sort of wild and unimaginable aircraft carrier that no one, I'm guessing, like up to that point, no civilians were ever able to get onto an aircraft carrier. So you have this like huge military, and by the way, there's 2 other ships there that are super historic as well. The Nautilus, and I think it's the like 457 or something like that. So you have these like big military ships sitting out there. And so you think about, is this guy going to pass up on being near there or featuring that somehow? The problem where you guys are at, that's an after. It's like not even a factor. So all I'm saying is put yourself in this guy's shoes. Think about what he would want you to see. And by the way, the clock would to the spot too. So
would he put the history of that ship over the other history of Charleston? I don't think he would.
But let's look at what's there. Navy is written inside the main of the Lion, isn't it?
Because you have Revolutionary War history and Civil War major history there in Charleston. And part of that was naval. Maybe that's it. But what you like you said, military and ships and Navy. So in the book, you start Charleston with page 84, the Devil Dogs. And the Devil Dogs is the U.S. Marine Corps. That's what that translates into. Your first clue to Charleston is U.S. Marine Corps.
Okay, so military. Okay, but and obviously a lot of military. So all I'm saying, like,
Confederate military.
This is the path I took. If anyone wants to know the start I did for Charleston, it's determining that the Devil Dogs, U.S. Marine Corps reference, the Devil Dogs.
Right.
So what were the Devil Dogs? U.S. Marine Corps soldiers, basically. The Marines you're looking for is not labeled the Marines in Charleston. It's something else. You have to follow the history of the Marine Corps all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And that connects you to a person right there in the book, George Washington, Washington Light Infantry. That puts you at the obelisk, which is in the painting at Washington Park.
Yeah, but Washington Light Infantry
is dedicated to the U.S. United States Marine Corps.
You do know, Washington Light Infantry owns Marion Square, right? And that was the headquarters for the Confederate.
That's right. And they still got that Marine Corps flag. They do demonstrations out there. That Marine Corps flag, the red flag that's a couple hundred years old or whatever. I think it's from the Revolutionary War, actually. I've been to Marion Square. I had one clue that took me there.
Yeah, the obelisk in Washington Square, if you look at the bottom of it, you'll see that it says it states all the battles that Washington Lights Infantry was in. And if you look at the bottom, it says the Battle of Seven Pines. Right?
Yeah.
You see a pine tree in the painting.
Yeah.
Why would why would he put the image of Teddy in this painting?
Well, the pendant is pointing to the pine tree. Right? So
but how do you square up the fact
Washington's president? Teddy's the president.
I don't see Washington in the painting. I see Teddy Roosevelt in the painting.
I don't see him.
Washington.
You can see.
I see what you're talking about with Teddy, but I know May 1913 is the USS Maine, but I've never been 1,000% that the capstan is the lion's nose. Yeah, it kind of looks like it, but there's features they should have used in there that you can go see that little circle right there.
That's the lion's nose.
Yeah, I just don't see it when I look at it. There's some other stuff in other paintings where people go, see that? I kind of make it out, but it's not. But with JJP, like the bubble and the spear in Boston was the O's of the word Boston. I'm like, how the hell is someone supposed to know that? You know, if you made a big donut, some with a hole in it, then someone would go, yeah, that's an O. But a spear is a circle. And you got two red circles in the Milwaukee painting. So are those supposed to be O's too? You know, there's bubbles in the Roanoke painting. Are those supposed to be O's as well? Are you supposed to take that bubble from Boston and also use it as an O in Roanoke Island? You know, it's like, how's someone supposed to know that? You know, you see the B with the back cut off in Boston. The T's the T. The S is backwards. The N is there.
But well, he's a surrealist painter, so
for Boston, it's like no one's going to figure that out.
Do y'all understand where? Do y'all understand where it was at home plate? and how you
It was behind home plate. That's the only place it could have been. I am in contact with people, and I am going to get the story of exactly where it's found, since
the image shows a left-hand batter, right, in the left hand. So to me, if you're standing in the left-hander's batter box, you got your back against the wall and you're facing the water. So to me, it was at the left-hander's batter's box.
I don't know if y'all could see that. I drew this on there.
Lower. Higher.
Which one is it? You can't make it out. I drew a clock around it. So just imagine if you took that painting and just zoomed in on home plate. This is north, south, and then you got east and west, and then 12, 6, 9, 3. Right over here would be 8, and that's the end of it. Because if you go to Langone Park and you stand right here on the painting, this is north, and this would be north in real life. So when you draw the clock across it, it puts it where the catcher and the umpire stand. The only place Byron could have buried it where nobody would have noticed. And then that match
across the street
in Chicago. What?
Hey, Eric, can you show that? Sorry.
In Boston, if you look across the street, the building across the street has the same pattern of windows that castle does on that box. It's a unique pattern. I don't got pictures right now, but go look for it. It's there.
Hang on, I'll be back in a second. I need a pen.
Yeah, there's only one set. I think in the image there's 2 sets. There's one set, but they are in an odd shape that is just across the street.
I mean, I don't know Boston, but you could see that. I mean, I haven't even looked at the Boston verse, and you can see how the Eichel works on there. You can see that there's Eichel and a trick in the verse, in every one of them. Would y'all want to talk about Charleston and how to find a start?
I think it's easier, Alan, than kind of what you're proposing.
Well,
all right. So the template is how to find a start is you get longitude and latitude. All right. Now it gives you a box around Charleston. All right. And you start reading the verses. Right. You look at the image, you look at the verses. Right. Of all the romance retold. Right. You read that line and you look at the picture and you realize that that's from Treasure Island. Right.
So what's the connection? What's the connection from Treasure Island to Charleston?
I never ever came across Treasure Island. A lot of people had used
the Pirate House located in downtown Charleston is talked about in Treasure Island. So if you look at the connection point between Treasure Island, which is in the verse pretty much, and Charleston, you ask yourself, how are these two connected? It's the Pirate House. And that would make sense. It's historic. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, in Treasure Island, they're using a map to find a treasure. That African skull has a map on it. Not only that, inside Treasure Island, a skeleton points the way to the treasure.
Okay, but there's none of that in the painting. There's none of that in the verse, is what I'm saying.
That's the African skull.
As simply as I can. If I look at it just really simply, and I ask myself, how are those two things connected, right?
Of all the romance retold.
Charleston and this verse from, Treasure Island, there is one common connection point between those that requires no thought whatsoever. And that
on the first line.
The Pirate House is that common connection point. So why not there? Why somewhere else if that's the
first reality? You got to understand you only have a box in Charleston, right? You have a box that's showing all of Charleston, how do you know to go to the pirate house? What's telling you to go to the pirate house?
That's the commonality, the common connection between the two. If I say, hey, he's mentioning Treasure Island, what does Treasure Island have to do with Charleston?
Yeah, but it's already
the pirate house. It's not a skeleton. It's not a map. It's the pirate house. I mean, and that's such a cool thing, a cool feature that the pirate house still exists, and it's mentioned in Treasure Island. Gosh, as an author, as a creative guy like Byron, that just makes sense, doesn't it? That he would want to put you there and see the pirate house and learn the history about it.
Yeah, but you already wed the verse. You already wed the verse to the image, right?
But okay, how about look at it this way? So if that was linking to Treasure Island and that house, what would that confirm the city?
Yes,
and that's probably all it does.
And I think
maybe
that too.
It's such a cool feature to have the pirate house exist, mentioned in Treasure Island, and now he's saying Treasure Island. As an author, as a creative guy, right? He was quirky and creative, and that's a connection point that a guy like that would say, wow, this is a way to tie all this together. It just seems so on the surface to me and so easy. I think there's a harder argument to argue against the pirate house than to argue for it. That's just me.
I think it's just the pirate history. I don't know if they say it's the house, but it's the pirate history.
And the pirate history is important because if White Point Gardens was the place, I think I've never found any pirate stuff in the book whatsoever. So if he used White Point, that would definitely have to be in there.
Yep.
There would be something about the march where they were dumped, the pirates that were executed. I mean, even Denmark Vesey, he was also, because if you look at the pendant hanging in the painting, when I first read the story of Denmark, do what?
The dog tags.
Yeah, but it kind of looks like a guy getting hung. And when I read the story of Denmark Vesey, and then if you zoom in on the rope, how it's tied, it looks like a noose with a little.
I doubt he would put it into the
hanging off of it, and I was like, ooh, I wonder if he'd actually use, hanging imagery. Yeah, probably in 1980, 81, 82.
I think Clockface is the cast iron man.
Hey, Eric, can you show the slide that I have uploaded? Can you show that slide?
Do you know who the cast iron man is?
No, I do not.
The Calhoun statue.
Okay. So you don't think that's Teddy? That's the most famous picture.
I see what you're talking about, but
I think it hints at Teddy for the Edwin line.
Yeah, because see the star right there. That is military. When you see that in the painting, it's either like the stars used in Houston for the Irish sheriff. Which, of course, sheriff comes from Irish. That's where we get the word sheriff from. I see what you're saying. I said because Teddy Roosevelt had that squinty-eyed face.
Angle of the mask to this historic photo and the eyes with the. I don't know, man. If you're not seeing this as Teddy, I can't help you. I can't help you.
I see it, but that's not the Teddy I'm using it for.
So Teddy was the only president to visit Fort Sumter, by the way. How cool is this? So to put Teddy on Fort Sumter, it makes total sense, doesn't it? And Teddy's all over the book.
Okay. Now I like that. So Teddy's the only president that ever visits Fort Sumter, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Look at this. He's the only president that ever visited the Waterside Theater in Roanoke Island. So with Mark, you saying that is Teddy. That's exactly the kind of connection you need to make.
I got one.
Everything I have and a little more on this.
It's like for Chicago, Ulysses Grant is the only president that ever visited Ireland. And I even found one the other day for another president visiting somewhere else. I can't remember who it was, but to this day, he's still the only president that's ever went there. Abraham Lincoln was friends with the king in Hawaii.
Kamehameha.
No one knew about that. That's part of the real estate broker story history. You find out.
But no, Douglas. So Douglas, I'm asking you honestly, you don't see this as Teddy?
No, I do not. Okay, that to me is Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter is shaped like that, correct?
Exactly the shape.
It's that too.
Okay.
Teddy visited.
It's also shaped
the only
like a house. There just happens to be a building called Fort Sumter House next to the park where the cask is supposed to be.
What's more famous?
Well, hey, with that, Douglas, there's a Fort Sumter time capsule in Washington Park. See, this is something I wanted to...
Listen, I'm not done. You wanted to talk about president. That's the place where John F. Kennedy stayed and got busted with the German spy. He was in the Navy. That was big news. And it's
painting. I see Teddy in the painting now.
Not only that, you have time by the Fort Sumter House. You got. It says White House close at hand, and you got a clock hand right by the Fort Sumter House.
That's true too. Even though I don't go with clock hands, it will work with the clock hands. Even though I don't.
See, this is what I always say. But is that in the? Can you find that in the book with any historical clues or people? Is there a story in the book that contains that information?
Well, the thing is, in the first line of all the romance, that's exactly what JFK was doing. He was in a romantic relationship.
That could
JFK is not in this.
That's what that is.
Teddy Romance Retold is talking. I believe it's talking about a UDC and how the UDC retold slavery and how slavery was and how plantation life was and kept white supremacy.
I think you're going too far into it. I think immigration is important but differs. You can't bend the puzzle to reality. You know.
Well, it says of all romance retold. How was it retold? You know, that's what. And Men of Tales and Tunes. Charleston is the only city in the United States of America. It has been the topic of more songs and stories than any other city. So men of tales and tunes. Tales are folklore and stories, and tunes are songs. Charleston is the city that is mentioned the most of any other city in this country in the history of music and stories. That historical research points you right at Charleston. It makes it. That's just another thing that Charleston's pretty easy to figure out because even the maps in the painting. I mean, it's funny how that is. To me, there's like too many clues that you really don't have to do any research. It's like, yeah, that's Charleston. That's downtown Charleston. Yeah, that's Fort Sumter. You know, it's like
I can place all those items on that image right there at King Street in the park, all of them.
Yeah, you can, right? And really, the only thing you don't have there is the Edwin, right? And to know that White Point Garden is not the location, you have to follow a path. To know that any location is not the location, you have to follow a path. And to follow a path, you got to have a start. And to find a start, you got to use the template, right? And if we're not using this template, we're just looking up history, right? We're just bouncing around, right? So he gives you a box in a city. And for Charleston, you see Charleston on the African mass. So that's what weds the verse. Seen here by eyes of old, you see Charleston on the African mass because of all the romance retold is Robert Louis Stevenson. And in that, a map leads them to the treasure and a skeleton points the way to the treasure. That's a skull mask. The skull mask is pointing the way to the treasure, right? So it's pointing to the outline of Charleston. It's pointing to the neck. That's what they call the outline of Charleston, right? It's called the neck. Well, the neck used to be called something else. It was called clenching the neck. The woman in the painting is clenching her neck. That's a location here in Charleston. That's where Charleston was divided, right? And if you look at the clues and you're saying they're symmetrical and it's pointing to a place that could be divided, you can't overlook that, right? Because Calhoun Street is where Charleston was divided, lower class and upper class, right? So the African mass is pointing to the neck, clenching the neck, right? And that's a way to skip the whole path and get to the dig site. But you'll get there and you won't know what to do because you'll see all these other clues in the painting that you did not use, right? And that's what happened to me, right? I get to Marion Square and I see a path going away, right? But I see all this stuff working in Marion Square, right? Why ain't it there, right? And I had to leave Marion Square, right? I had to walk away from stuff that I knew was, that I thought, right, that were just 100%, right? And then I left and I was like, man, I was so crazy. I was thinking all this was it. And then I
That's
go all
That's
the way
when you
around.
figure out there's more to it. I've done that so many
Exactly.
times.
I did that about 7 different times, right? And I put the shovel in the ground twice, right? One time by myself, the other time with some other people.
Yeah.
But you have to follow a path, and to follow a path, you got to find a start. And to find a start in Charleston, you read the verse, right? Between two arms extended is talking about the West Ashley, or the Ashley River and the Cooper River. They're the same person, right? And the African mask shows Charleston as a face head. He puts a little dot up in Park Circle, right? Makes it an eye, right? So it's a person between two arms extended. Below the bar that binds, the bar that's sticking into the side of the African mask, that's a bar that binds. That's a sutra. That's holding up the pendant, right? So below that is where Fort Sumter is. That's your start, right? Because
and everybody needs to realize, if they're new to the secret, how when you see the poem verse bar that binds, that is so vague. You got to have something concrete to attach that to.
stars
Like
and
bar,
bars.
bar. What kind of bar? Is that a candy bar?
Well,
Could
in the
be.
painting,
Candy's
in the
part of it.
paint, in the painting, I see stars and bars, right? This is where I messed up from the beginning. I read in the back of the book that Dixie Pixie can be found anywhere, Volvo with stars and bars, right? And that led me straight to Marion Square, because Marion Square is stars and bars. It's a Confederate flag. That's the nickname of a Confederate flag, is stars and bars. So you're connecting it to military, the stars and bars to military. Why can't it be the military of the Confederate, right? Because I think it 100
that flag at White Point Gardens in the 80s too.
It could be
Most of the parks built like that. Even the plaza down here is that crisscross corner to corner feature.
It's actually gone, but I don't think there's a Confederate flag down there anymore. No.
So what I think
what you're missing in all of this is the Teddy connection. I mean, how many people do we see in the paintings, historical figures that are represented in the painting? So all I'm saying is there's not like 10 of these historical figures in the paintings and they just happen to represent, oh, well, here's just another person who was hanging around the city. No, there's so few of them. I think Milwaukee is one. But I'm just saying that, I'll say just for a second, you've got a guy, and I don't know. I know Douglas doesn't want to see this, but I think if you survey...
Let me respond after you're done. So.
Okay. What I'm saying is, if this is Teddy, and I don't know how you can't think it's not Teddy, but I guess you do. It's so freaking close. Teddy's all over the book. We know. So anyway, so the thing is, okay,
he's part of New York and Milwaukee as well.
He's showing us one guy. Yes, Eric. He's showing us
New
one
York,
guy.
absolutely.
So if your solve doesn't really involve Teddy, I think you have some serious work to do to convince me that he's just showing us Teddy for fun. That, oh, Teddy happened to go to Fort Sumter and that's it.
Okay.
Well, you know what? Since you showed the White House that he actually called the White House,
yeah,
I know how Teddy connects to Washington now.
Okay, so look, he also built the West
They
Wing.
have something in common.
He built the West Wing. So I'm saying if you overlay Teddy Roosevelt on top of this, it all connects. Okay. Do you know Edwin Harleston and Edwina, the niece? You know, Edwin's, do you know what they used to call Edwin Harleston?
Teddy. They used to call him Teddy. I know, that's why I think he's in there. But do you know why? But do you know what Edwin means? Do you know why he gives us that line? At the very end.
I don't care what that is, but I know Edwin Harleston, which is clearly referenced. His nickname was Teddy.
Come on, let Alan finish.
Because it's pairing Teddy line to the Or the Eighth line. They're the same location, right? So is Freedom on the Birth of a Century, right? And May 1913. Freedom at the Birth of a Century is where that Jubilee parade ended in Marion Square. That's where they waited that century from 1865 to 1965, right? Before, so they could get their freedom, so they could enter parks here in Charleston, stay in hotels, right? So
the African history of Charleston is incredibly important, more important than any other city in the country. Because basically, I've read that research. Africans living in Charleston that had relatives elsewhere, they were encouraging them by letter to come to Charleston. They basically told them, no one screws with you here. You can come here. You can, and this is the free blacks. They told them, you can come here and no one's going to bug you. And it's that was the total truth about Charleston.
The media was like that for here in Charleston, like the newspaper and all.
Yep.
If you read into it, they were like that. But if you moved outside of Charleston, it was not like that at all, right? If you just moved just outside of the neck, anywhere, it was like that.
Yeah. But it's like another example of the mistreatment of Africans that were in America at the time. St. Augustine was also a safe haven for African slaves because when the Spanish governor was there, they didn't allow slavery. So slaves flocked down of all backgrounds, but especially African slaves flocked to St. Augustine because once you got there, you were safe. They didn't allow anybody to come in there and take you back out, and nobody there could actually assimilate you, just grab you and put you into any kind of slavery because it wasn't allowed. And this is going way back in the history of St. Augustine, back to when slaves were here before America was even founded. It's another thing everybody else needs to figure out. So go on, go out.
Also, that Indian, Native Americans were slaves, more than it's said too. Nobody really talked about it that much.
Yeah, that's a big part of the secret book. I mean, North Boston with the Italians. There's a reason why the Italians were in North Boston. It's like. It's anti-Semitism. You got that of religion, your ethnic background, where you're from slaves to potato famine Irish people that immigrated here to Italians immigrating to Boston. And, a lot of the immigrations came in through New York because of Ellis Island, but found out real quickly that they didn't want to be in New York because people didn't like, this is where all your Little Italy and Little Greek and all that stuff. Chinatown out in San Francisco. So you're going to learn all about that. So, pack your lunch for the history lesson because that's exactly what you're going to get. And how does it play? It plays into the entire story. You really can't. If you do that Asian research like in San Francisco, you see that most of the Asians came there for the same damn reason that everybody else was. Gold rush, silver rush. Even Mark Twain was there for that. But real quick, the people around there said, hey, don't sell any claims to the Asian people coming in here. And that's how they end up doing all these other odd jobs and basically becoming slaves. So different time in history, same situation, because they're Italian or Greek or black or whatever. They're just being stepped all over by basically the people that were in charge at the time in the area. They didn't want to sell claims or anything like that, so they had to do what they had to do to survive.
Let's think about this for a second. Just for a second, is the whole theme, and I know, Alan, in your solve idea, you're focused on the African and in that history. And so I think just wind yourself back to 1980. Okay. And the way we view races, different races today, is far different than it was, let's say, back in 1980. Right. So all I'm saying is, is that going to be a central focus of Charleston? Okay. And that's a black eye in a sense, but he also can't ignore it because that's obviously the featured group. And it makes sense. It's a reverence thing to say, hey, I'm going to honor the African folks, and this is a part of the history. I personally don't think he would make that the centerpiece of this puzzle simply because it is a black eye, right? I mean, it's not something, hey, Charleston's proud of. But he still has to acknowledge it, and it's very much a part of the history of the city.
Have you read into the Edwin Harleston family and where they come from?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, they're a mixed race, and that the family come about from unconsensual sex.
Yeah, I've read the story. I think the biggest thing there
is that explains why the diamond is surrounded by darkness, right? Because the whole puzzle is about the African immigration, and they did not immigrate.
Well, it is, but Alan, all I'm saying is when we think about what clues and what story does he want us to know, and I know that is a huge part of Charleston, clearly, and I've been to Charleston a bunch. You live there. Back in 1980, certainly, it's the way we think about history and the scars of the history. I just don't think he would focus on it. Just like I don't think he would show a noose in the painting.
He gives us 1913. Do you know what happened in 1913? The crisis, all this stuff that the UDC did in 1913.
Okay,
a lot of stuff. Woodrow Wilson.
I'm not saying he's ignoring it. I'm just saying as a point of focus. I think it's important for us to try to get into the guy's brain and think about, hey, this is a fun, interesting hunt and history and all that. Is this going to be the focus? I just don't think so. But I wanted to just show you guys this because I do think the words are important. Fair remuneration, and he's capitalizing fair, saying this is important. Okay, remuneration. When's the last time you used the term remuneration? Just out of curiosity. Like never.
He's using a hard word.
That's a word. So
I think when you pair that to the picture, you get F and M.
The fair remuneration is the cask. That's your reward.
Okay, but he's using some very odd words to describe it. So I'm saying is if you overlay
he's a former teacher, an author, a editor. This guy is nothing but big words.
So all you're saying, though, in that, Douglas, is that it's just a way to describe the box. And I don't think so because, again, if you overlay Teddy Roosevelt on top of this, this was a central theme for his campaign, a square deal.
If I kick the Teddy Roosevelt, stick out, your whole thing falls over.
No, it doesn't. It is
for it not to. When you get to Patriots Point, you got to see the next line, right? Do you see the next line when you get to Patriots Point? Because if you're getting to Patriots Point on the line of All the Romance Retold, Men of Tales and Tunes should be your next line.
Were there songs sung about Teddy Roosevelt?
I think
that would be a connection.
Can I show you how to get to the line Men of Tales and Tunes?
I'll Google that real quick.
Just the first little bit of my path, and you will see that there is a path.
I'm not saying that yours can't work, but I think this is a big handicapping exercise, right? Because we don't have all the information. And so you have to handicap it. You have to say, what are the odds that this is right versus this one? And it's always measured against each other.
Exactly.
So my whole point in this is if you overlay Teddy on top of this, you don't need Teddy, but it all makes sense when you do. Okay.
But if you never went to White Point Garden, right, and you never used that lion's nose, or you never used the daisy, or you never used the birds and the wings, or you never used the H in the African mask, or all the other clues, right? you're going to Patriots Point, and you're hoping everything's there, right? You do have the start. You do have the start. I think that's the start. You start at Fort Sumter. You point at 4 o'clock to the pair.
You
right?
can't start at Fort Sumter.
You do start. You start at Fort Sumter.
No, I don't.
Where do you start?
At the Pirate House.
At the Pirate House.
Yeah.
All right. So the Pirate House is of all the romance retold.
Yeah, that's the common link.
Right. And
the common link because the Pirate House is mentioned in Treasure Island.
So Fort Sumter is.
I'm going to give you a starting point, right? That's it. In my book, right. That's it.
All right. So Fort Sumter is Men of Tales and Tune, and then Seen Here would be Patriots Point.
No. Fort Sumter has nothing to start.
We know every line is a different location. We know that. We know that on the path that every line is a different location.
Yeah. So I think he starts at the Pirate House. He goes over the old Pearman Bridge, which the big pear is sitting there, and it looks like a bridge. I don't think it goes beyond that.
What's your clue to get you from Pirate House? What moves you in the image?
So again, the shoreline, as you guys know, has changed pretty significantly. Okay, but here's
you can't answer it because you're not following a path with the verse the image.
You go from the Pirate House up the shoreline to the bridge, over the bridge to Patriots Point.
All right, show me a bridge in the painting. The Pearman?
Yeah, the old Pearman Bridge is not there anymore because they tore it down. But
all right, but your verse is not matching up.
What do you mean by that? So let me point something else out to you. Hearken. Have you ever used the word hearken?
In church.
It means to obey and listen. I know that. I mean, it was in Edgar Allan Poe.
Well, you don't actually spell hearken without an E. The typical way to spell is Hearken. Okay. Now, if you look up hearken and you just put it into a Google search, you see that's a very famous boat company. It's a very famous. They do. I forget. They had anyway. There's this whole history of hearken sailing. So I think he's telling you, hey, sail over to Patriots Point. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't need that. I don't need that because I have clock hands pointing to Patriots Point, and I have photographic evidence saying that this is the right spot. So,
when you get to Patriots Point, evidence. When you get to Patriots Point, you see Coleman Boulevard going down to Ben Sawyer. Ben was the main character in Treasure Island. That's how you know to go south. Right, and you end up on the pendant for the next line, Men of Tales and Tune, Men of Tales and Tune.
I disagree.
And when you get to the bottom of Ben Sawyer, the pendant is pointing to 23rd Street, right, and Goldbug Street is there. But why not 32nd Street, right? So go to 32nd Street. 32's in the painting. So go to 32nd Street. 32nd Street is where the Hunley left off, right? And if you look at the wings of the ferry, they match Sullivan's Island and Island Palms, right? And where Breeches Inlet is right between it, right? That would be the legs. That would be Breeches Inlet, right? The legs. That's why it shows water coming down. That's Breeches Inlet. And what is the legs doing? Turning around. So you turn around and you go back to the pendant in the painting for your next line. All right. So that was Men of Tales of Tune. Of all the romance retold, Men of Tales of Tune, and Cruel and Bold. Right. So you're back at Cruel and Bold on Fort Sumter. And you're at Fort Sumter on land. Right. And it says Seen Here by Eyes of Old. And your white points are on your clock. So that's your clue. It's road clues, right? So it's road clues the whole way until you get to hearken to the words, right? So White Point Boulevard, not White Point Gardens. If you look where the H goes over on James Island, that's White Point Boulevard there. And then it goes up, and that's seen here, right? So seen here, and you're leaving seen here, and you pass May 1913, the capstone, and you see it, right? And you land on Calhoun statue above the neck, just like that, just like the skull mask is pointing to the treasure, is pointing to the neck, the outline of Charleston. So looking at that, you see a path. You see of all the romance retold, the branch, Men of Tales and Tune. You're on the pendant, right? And it's pointing to 32th Street. So that's Men of Tales and Tune. And then you turn around because you're at the legs. You turn around and you back at Fort Sumter itself on land and in the painting, and it's Cruel and Bold. Next line, seen here, White Point Boulevard, and then you go up and you land on Eyes of Old, and you place the pendant on the Calhoun Tower, but you don't place it there yet because where you at in the image is the X that Orm makes. You're at Marion Square, X Marion Square at the Calhoun statue, right? And what's your clue there for your next spot? Hand over street, hand over hand. And look what the next line is. The next line is stand and listen to the birds, right? And Martin Luther King pool is on Hanover Street, right? So you leave from Marion Square, the X, you go to Hanover Street, you get there, you stand and listen to the martins, the birds, the martins, the black people in the pool swimming. Hear the cool, clear sound of water, talking about the people in the pool. I went there and talked to a guy. There used to be a stand behind home plate that they used to watch the baseball games in. And if you're standing in that stand, you can see the people in the pool. The woman looks like she's floating in a pool. So this path matches everything, right? I didn't bend stuff to make it work. The road clues led me, right? So you can look, it's roads all the way to Coleman Boulevard, Ben Sawyer.
Are you using the book for any of this theory? Or what are you using? Just painting and poem?
Painting and poem. I used the back of the book, the very beginning, and I messed up. Once I jumped to Marion Square because Dixie Pixie, stars and bars in the painting, I went to Marion Square and I had to restart. I had to figure out how the other ones found a start because when I was in Marion Square, I saw Coleman Boulevard and I never used Coleman Boulevard. So I wasn't sure where it was. Right.
So you're thinking the primary ferry is African and the second is Irish Scottish because you're using Dixie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what would you assume the area concentration of the North is in Charleston?
Marion Square is designed after the Scottish flag.
Okay.
The Irish Scottish battle flag.
Yeah, that's something I do. I once I come across something personally,
right, so
I make sure it has a connection to a ferry. See what ferry this is, because the book tells you need them.
I never worried about that. All I did was image and painting because I like art, right? That's why I got into this. I just like art. I can draw. I don't really paint that much, but I draw a lot. I grew up drawing, and just being crafty.
Well, you're not the only one. You're not the only one that does it that way. But
so I followed this path, right? And I ended back at Marion Square before I even realized symmetrical, right? I knew division trick because I used division at MLB pool, right? I'm at Martin Luther King pool and it says hearken to the words, right? And you have freedom at the birth of a century, talking about birth, meaning do addition on the next line, 19 plus 13. And then you have or, so you divide 8 and that's 4. So that gives you 28, right? And that's the Memorial Day marker in Hampton Park. It's the eye of the African mask. And once you get there at that marker, you realize that if you're standing in the middle of Hampton Park, it's between two arms extended, right? And Hampton Park is where law defended at that marker. The next line is between two arms extended. And guess what you do? You beeline it back to Marion Square with the beelines, right? That's so clever, right? And it took me a long time to figure that out. You go 120 degree from the bridge in Hampton Park, and it passes through three parks. It passes through Allen Park, or first Hampton Park, Allen Park, and then Mitchell Playground, right? And very interesting about Mitchell Playground is there's 3 stories of Mitchell next door, right? And at Allen Park looks just like the Daisy, right? And it has a White House there. It's got a house that looks just like the pendant, right? All these locations, when you get to it, you can almost see the whole verse there, but it's only missing like 3 or 4 things, right? So you want to dig in all the spots that you come to, right? So you beeline it back to Marion Square, and what's your next line? Embedded in sand, and you land on Hornwork in Marion Square that's embedded in sand, and it's the lines here, right? The very next line is weights of fair remuneration, and over there where that fountain is, where the Jubilee parade ended, there's a parking meter there. That's pay in time for weights of fair remuneration, right? So you go there. The next line is White House close at hand, and you go to the Calhoun statue. And if you're standing on the 8th level of the Calhoun statue, you're between two arms extended, below the bar that binds, beside the long palm shadow, because it is the shadow, and you're standing beside it. And the White House is close at hand. And if you place the pendant on it, that's when you place the pendant on it, and you turn the long hand to wait at the obelisk, the short hand will point to the White House. And what does it say? Beside the long palm shadow, beside the long hand shadow. If you look in the image, the shadow of the long hand is the short hand, and it points to the steps. Well, the short hand at Marion Square points to the steps of the Knights of Columbus building. And the mouth has 12 steps, so does the Knights of Columbus building. The Knights of Columbus building has white handrails, white steps, and red on the sides. If you look at the mouth, it's red, white, with 12 steps, right? I thought it was buried right there. I thought it was right there inside them planter boxes at the Knights of Columbus building, because the star is shown not too far away from it, like right there, right on the left-hand side of them steps. If you line it up, it matches perfect, right? So the long hand has got a confirmer also. You point it to the Wade Hampton obelisk, and behind the Wade Hampton obelisk is the Mendel Rivers building. On the African mask, you see what can be an obelisk. Behind it, you see rivers. Right? Same thing in Marion Square. You see the obelisk, you see rivers behind it, meaning the Mendel Rivers building. Right? So when you get to the White House close at hand that it gets you to, at the very end of the verse, the very end of my path, right? I didn't know this yet. Right? You get to the end of the verse, and that's your start. When you're standing on the Calhoun statue up on the 8th level, there's a scene of 2 guys with his arms stretched out on each side of you, right? So you're standing there, and the verse should narrow you down to a little box from there, right? Of all the romance retold by the United Daughters of the Confederacy, meaning the Wade Hampton obelisk, because they put it there, right? And then you stand and listen to the birds, hear the cool, clear sound of water, the fountain right there, right? Everything is pointing you to that location, right? And what you do
Except the clock hands.
Huh?
Except the clock hands.
No, the clock hand. I used the clock hands to point me over there.
But you have to go through Patriots Point.
I did.
So why would he put you a compass where you run into all this other stuff and not like something nearby where you're talking about?
Because it's a path to the start, right? It's a path to the part that holds the treasure.
I'm just saying, if you cut through Patriots Point, why not look around there and see if something's interesting? I did.
I didn't go to Patriots Point. I went to you should have. I should have went to Patriots Point. I should have researched there because of the pair, because USS LaFay, and that's his name was Bartlett, right? And that's a type of pair. And you could say that the pair is for that and not for the bridge, right? Well, but Coleman Boulevard is there. You're stopping at Patriots Point and you're never jumping on Coleman Boulevard, or you're jumping on Coleman Boulevard and going to Patriots Point.
Well, the way I end up at Patriots Point is that's where the clock hands are pointing if you align it to Fort Sumter. And I know you guys like the Fort Sumter house and this other stuff. That, to me, that's like second and third best. Why not use the actual Fort Sumter? That's my thing. Is
because all the stuff that I learned,
use the most obvious, right, or the best example. So anyway, I found this because I did a little searching around, and wow, what a freaking coincidence! Hearken to the words of a true, not White Point Garden, not Marion Square, not Washington Square, but a true patriot.
So we got to find this thing too.
I think it's rather interesting.
So you hearken to the words, and then you get Edwin and Edwina, and you tie Teddy to it, right? And at the end,
Edwin's name is Teddy.
All you need is Edwin at the end. You know why? Because Edwin means rich, happy, and you're.
No one knows that though, and that's like a second or third derivation type thing. Edwin Carlson, his name was Teddy.
Yeah, but when you pair the two oar lines, and then you pair the two oar lines, you see that the fountain that looks just like the capstone that I tied May 1913 to is at the same location at Freedom at the Birth of a Century. And then the other two, Edwin and Or on the 8th. Or on the 8th is where you're digging in Marion Square, and it's where you're standing in the painting, because there's 8 objects in the painting, and you're on the woman, her ex, that her arms make, and you're at the dig site digging up treasure.
I don't know, man. I don't think there's a few, right? It's like, so anyway, I think a lot of solves can work. And that's the great challenge here is how do you sort through, because I'm not saying that you haven't figured this out, Alan. You clearly have figured out something that works. And who am I to say that it's bogus or something bad? You clearly spent a lot of time and you've researched it and it makes a lot of sense. Now, there are 10 other solves too that make a lot of sense. Douglas spent all this time and done research and wound the clocks back. And so many people are in WPG. So I'm saying is we have to have a way as a community to sort through those solves and rank order them to figure out what really adds up, right? So it's a probability game as I see it versus a possibility. There's a lot of possible solutions. The thing about Teddy, it's so compelling of a narrative that interweaves so many lines of the verse. Plus, we see his picture. So when I line up the clock or the mask with Fort Sumter, and I just did that because I'm like, I don't know, like it fits, so why not see? And the clock hand points at Patriots Point. I'm going to snoop around Patriots Point and see if there's anything that makes sense. Well, there's actually photographic proof that matches the painting exactly from the 80s. So it's like there just starts to add up to me. That's all I'm saying. But
there's a couple.
That's why I'm in Patriots Point, because it really works from there.
There's a couple Edwins that it could be, right? How do you know which Edwin is the correct one? Because of Teddy, right?
Well, it's Edwin. He says Edwin and Edwina, right?
Yeah.
No, that clue is actually a clue to Charleston and not anymore.
Maybe, I don't know.
Well, it's not to you.
In mind. Edwin and Edwina is named after John Wilkes Booth's father, who was an actor. The kids were named after, I don't know if he was the father or the grandfather.
See, that's why it's Teddy. That's why Teddy's in the painting.
So you don't think Edward Harleston is the Edwin we're talking about?
No. I don't believe that either.
We know, I'm trying to remember this. So these were the kids of John Wilkes Booth's brother, right?
Well, the Edwina,
from what I remember,
Edwina was a niece of Edwin Harleston.
Yeah. And their father or grandfather is the Edwin you're looking for. It's Edwin Booth, and they had a stage company that did a lot of performances. I think they were based out of Charleston, from what I remember, but I didn't read more into it. Just basically.
Oh, look,
But of course, they got a connection to Booth in the assassination because they're related.
I got a couple. I got the Harleston thing. Edward Harleston Village is the village right next to the battery.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
okay. Well, also, I don't really believe it's Edward Harleston. In my opinion, it's Edward Hopper. It's a famous artist, and he actually painted a picture of where the cask is.
This is why
1920, and they copied it.
Well, his name's also Gilliard.
If it's Edward Hopper, who's Edwina?
Well, that's the puzzle. That's the thing. It's like Edward and Edwina are named after. The answer is Edward.
After one
That's
person.
the main thing in a wordplay kind of situation, which I think this is filled with wordplay. I don't care what people say. An editor, a former teacher, this is right up his alley.
It's massive wordplay. This book is massive.
I don't know why it's not the most obvious answer. I think you have a harder argument that it's
because the thing is
obscure than the most obvious.
The thing is, if you listen to JJP, if you listen to what he said, it's not the obvious one. He doesn't want the obvious one. It's a misdirection.
Yeah.
No, but
all three parts that were found were messed up in 1981. They weren't new.
I posted this earlier, because you got Sean Kelly wrote in that book that it's in Toronto, and I'm 1000% it's Montreal. But if you look under the Toronto Grease story where it says herbs pocus, pocus ain't used by itself. Pocus is hocus pocus, magic trick. Herbs, it's basically, it translates from Latin to English as a city, an illusion. It's a trick, or a city, a trick. It's telling you right there that Toronto is a trick.
I like Toronto.
That's just the way I interpret the book. It's telling you Toronto. So Toronto Gree. Toronto is the city, Gree's the ferry. The herb.
I got something for the trick too.
That city, an illusion. That's how word play is used. And right there, it's telling you a city, this city, Toronto is an illusion. Don't be here. Because the team spirits takes you to the first sports, and that's the Montreal Expos, the Toronto.
Okay, so you're in Montreal still.
So,
okay, yeah, I'm in Montreal. We're not
near that city center though. Figure out those other clues, But so the putting Toronto right there in the name is just misdirection.
I have a question.
And Sean Kelly's just screw it. Sean Kelly's on the same page with Byron. He's part of the trickery of the writing of the words. Him and Ted Mann.
At least when Byron edited
died, he said, "I'm going to have everybody running."
He had something to say about it, I think.
Let me ask you this, guys. Why do you think some certain puzzles are more interesting? That people talk about the same ones, and they do sort of don't pay much attention to some of the other ones.
Well, Milwaukee, I don't know.
No.
I never visited Milwaukee. Got nothing against Milwaukee. Their beer ain't that great. So I used to buy it a lot because it was cheap.
Old mill doggy, baby.
Best.
All right, that got me some beer pong now.
Yeah. So
Now,
why?
it's like, okay. So
why is that,
maybe
Eric?
we
That's
talk
like
about that
people,
in the meetup too.
Why? Why do you think that some people there's just a focus on certain puzzles versus others?
Some puzzles have major.
New York's more exciting than Milwaukee. You know what I mean? Like just naturally, I think.
Boring.
Yeah.
So some have. I mean, people. I don't think people are taking into account what. I mean, so if you read the front of the book and you go, okay, one's Spanish, one's African. The Spanish one with the conquistador is so obvious. The African's so obvious. Once you get to like Milwaukee, is just so vague. I've got so many clues to so many things and so many immigrations, but I just can't cross connect anything to a park.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to help.
Even woman playing harpsichord silently. Okay, so in one park in Milwaukee, I found a woman with a harp. So I think harpsichord is just, most people will go, because Byron wants you to learn something. Most people will go, what the hell is a harpsichord? So you got to look that up. But I think basically just where he could say home, feel at home in Boston and leave out plate. In Milwaukee, he just added a chord. Harpsichord, it's just harp. He just added crap on the end. And
so there's a clue. I'm going to let you guys in on this little. I've got my own little secret. There's a theme to Milwaukee that you all are going to laugh at when I reveal it. But there is a theme around.
I got a bunch. Go ahead, hit me.
But this is my cliffhanger for the night. But it's a theme, but it very much is a part of Milwaukee. But you're gonna kind of laugh, but it takes you into parks. So to your point, Eric, you're having a hard way of getting in the parks. There is a way to do it, and I'm not ready to show it just yet, but there's a theme, and it comes from the painting, and I'm going to show you guys that, and it probably will open some things up. But the lake, what is it, Lakeshore Park or whatever that people seem to be at?
When's that happening?
Not there.
When are you showing it?
I'm working
I don't even buy the lion thing with Milwaukee. Sorry. Sorry for whoever. I don't see the lion. They're like, the lion there.
I'll tell you, I watched Expedition Unknown bury and film something. They believe in a certain kind of way this puzzle goes. And a lot of things drove them away. And unfortunately, it was the person who's in charge of the secret right now, whose logic they believe, Mr. Ward.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and they have a hard time getting through that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm talking with some people that work right around Josh Gates. They had a meeting. Josh Gates said basically everybody they did a show on, except for Dustin White. They came to conclusion these people don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's as simple as that. That's why Dustin's right about the shadow stuff. I just don't think I never came across any of that shadow theory stuff. And where he was at the totem
I call it the old quest for treasure logic. That's what they're using.
So basically, you find a box, Josh Gates will call you. That's basically there's people watching, and that's basically why the secret show stopped. It's like there's no rhyme or reason. Josh Gates is confused by the book. He says that every one of his Josh Gates event where he talks about the secret. It's very confusing, and that's why it's confusing, because there's a process to all this. But my opinion, you got to use the book. You got to use the fairies at the beginning of the book. Gives you instructions, and you got to follow. Like Teddy Roosevelt, if he's something in Charleston, you'd have to figure out what immigration his family background is, which I think they're English, because I know FDR was real good friends with the royal family.
Roosevelt, I think they're more like Norwegian area, I think.
Yeah, they could be a mix. But I mean, there's stuff in a lot of stuff with the secret. For anybody that watches this that's new, it's any of these people you see of real history, it's not like Mark Twain's a great example. It's not what he's most known for or what you might have learned in school. There was a lot of objects of people's, like Washington was also an inventor. So was Ben Franklin. They have other things that revolved inside their work. You know, like if you use Stephen King in a book, you go, yeah, he's a horror writer, but what else does Stephen King do? You know, you might find out he likes skateboarding at one time. Just something off the wall, kooky.
So on that note, Eric,
that might be part of the painting, but when you do the research on Stephen King, you go, oh, it's like, I can't say this for Charleston. I spent all week driving around my car trying to figure out how can I say this without not giving anything away. But when I reached a point in Charleston, I have found out that there was more. There was more that basically, and one thing I will give away: when you get to the park, you're thinking you're at, and this makes sense when you look at a lot of paintings. Look around at what else is there. And what I found is there's stuff at the park that's not in the book. So you get to this point basically, and I think this is the way Byron might have intended it. You're like digging around, probing, going, there's absolutely nothing here. So now you got it. He always says your perspective should not be lost. So you need to turn around and start looking at what else is in the park. And you're just doing, this would be just another level, which is something Palancar talked about. It's another level making stuff more difficult. They think they're going to get here and go, this water bottle monument is where it's at. And then the book shows you there's 5 more damn steps you got to do. It's like, yeah, it got you to this point, but it doesn't mean the cast is buried here. Now, because I went back to the book so many times, and what I found in Charleston is it centers around, I'm just going to say an A. I'm not going to say whether it's an event or a person or a man or a woman or nothing. And then when you do research about this, it leads you to another story where basically there is a pretty good description of what happened to this person at the end. And there can't be a no better, like if you were following a puzzle and you said, this is Abraham Lincoln. Let me verify it, see if I can find the stories. And then you find a story where it says, yeah. And in the end, he was shot in the head. And you go, it's 1,000% Abraham Lincoln. That's basically what I found in Charleston. And I was like, but hidden in some crap. I said, I'm looking for one word. Boom, there it is right there. I went there looking for that word. If this is right, this is where it'll be confirmed. But the thing I can't tell anybody about Charleston, only me and one other person in the world knew this, and I still can't say it. But it's not okay. So it'd be more like a blanket term. Instead of looking at a person or event or something like that, you would look at something else that's quite common, based on the areas that you're at. Like we were talking about the Christianity, Catholic, the feast and everything that happened at St. Augustine. Something very similar to that. That actually plays in St. Augustine. So you're not just looking for people's events in the city. Like Teddy and Washington, George Washington, they both got something in common with a particular group of people. I'll say that. So if you said Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, so he's got that association with slave, period. African slaves, Irish slaves, Native American slaves. What other president might have something in common like that with Lincoln? So Teddy, Washington, this particular subject, they both basically did something about it.
I got one.
Best I could put it.
One. JFK and Abraham Lincoln were both assassinated.
Shut up. And if I gave it away, everybody would go there and just start digging one particular spot in Charleston. This might not even be in White Point Garden because the Do-si-Do statue. Yeah, I went there 2 weeks after I announced it, and there was 2 big assholes, Doug. That's the biggest reason I don't. And I love why they dug so close to that, they got right into the footer. And pieces of the footer are everywhere. They're just knocking. I was like, what is you? That's not the cast. That's called the footer of that whole monument. Pieces of it all over the ground.
Hey,
My
Eric.
cousin,
But it's all, Washington Park has been completely covered in grass now. There's no digging now. And one of the future podcasts, I'm going to get into compaction rates. Because it's over 200 at Washington Park. So
my cousin works for Charleston, and he's over Washington Square, and people are probing out there all the time, busting water lines all around that statue there.
There's cameras at Garden
too, by the way.
Do what?
Byron would have run that risk too, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he did that everywhere.
Hey,
you got to think about places he could hide. There's places he went that were too open.
I mean this is
Great Garden is great. He buried it so fast.
He's downtown during the crack epidemic. That's a little hairy.
Yeah.
Hey,
Eric. There's a lot. I just, I appreciate all the work you did, Alan. But you're like, not a single thing you said I ever came across. And I like that. I like that people have their own different ways they're getting there. I ain't found crap. I'll admit that. I get that all the time. Like, you ain't found shit, so shut up. And I'm like, hey, he could be right. And I could be completely wrong. This is what is so nice about it. But I just tell the naysayers to go, hey, this is it's easy. It's not supposed to be a bullshit. Get out of here with that crap. We're way past that garbage.
Well, once you get to your dig site, all the stuff like the litany of the jewel,
it's all supposed
all
to
the
jump out in your
stuff
face.
is going to just make sense, right?
Yeah.
And
like in San Francisco, when you get to, if people just simply looked at Golden Gate Park and you'd realize the mountains behind her, okay, you see that over at like Strawberry Hill and that little Asian garden area. You see statues of Asian women. You got the Flower Conservatory has the rose. There's moon in there. I see Mark shaking his head. It's just basically your perspective should not be off. Just kind of take a look around.
Think about this for a second, okay? And I'm proposing this to you guys. Okay, you're out making a puzzle, right? Let's think about how he actually put these things together. And this relates back to Eric. Is like,
that's the first research I did.
No one that I know is like better on the stories and the fair foe and all that than you. Okay, I think you have that. Okay, and so let's think about how he's been. So does he start in a spot and then work from there and end up somewhere? No, he's more. And this is my view. I could be wrong. More than likely, he's understand like what story do I want to tell in this city. So if I take Cleveland. No insults or disregard for Cleveland, but there's nothing iconic there such as there is in San Francisco. So my only point is when you're thinking about a place like San Fran, and I would argue Charleston, back in 1980, the Yorktown was a huge deal. And this is a military guy that likes ships, navies all over the place. So that narrative to me makes a ton of sense. Okay. But if I'm sitting there in Milwaukee, where's the place you have to go when you go to Milwaukee? I'll throw that to you, Doug. Where do you have to go?
I don't know.
Okay. How about San Francisco? If you're going to San Francisco, let's say for the very first time.
Now, Milwaukee would be beer, hands down.
Yeah. Right.
Where are you going to go? Unequivocally, you are going to the Golden Gate Bridge. Okay. So I'm just saying, think about that for a second. Now, does that mean that it's necessarily there? No. However, when we think about, hey, he's going to pick a spot that he really wants you to end up. And then he's going to work backward from there to get to a place. Right. So he's going to do it in reverse. So I would propose to you or anybody out there looking to solve these. Again, Cleveland, I can't name you something that would be super interesting. Chicago, there isn't, it's kind of the shoreline in downtown, which is where he ended up. But this is the way we have to think about this. How did he actually build this? So relating this back to your story, the stories, Eric, is I think that comes after, right? So I think he picks the spot. He works backwards from there to the various places he wants to stop. And yeah, and some of those, there's right.
Palancar gave away a good clue. You just reminded me of that. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I've heard the story when he says, I'm being a lookout, and Byron shows up and he goes, you can bury it. Byron said, I already did. But today, Brian Zim was asking him, and I think basically he was referencing that he was taking photos while Byron was burying it. So this shows you, that tells you he's working backwards. And then he talks like after that they're adding stuff.
Absolutely. So this is my point on the stories, because I know that's you kind of where you hang your hat, Eric, and I think that's fine. There's a lot. Yes, there's information and clues in the stories and the illustrations in the back. It almost has to be. It's 71% of the book.
Yeah, doing it backwards is the way you got to do any of them.
So my only thing with that is some of these backstories, I think, enhance that rather than lead it. So that's why for me, the stories are kind of backfilling and supporting what I find in the verse and the painting, right? Not that they're not important. It's just, for me, I don't want to lead with the stories necessarily, right? Just because I think those come after. I don't think he can bury it in the right spot and have all the other stops along the way as a function of the immigration story and the ferries and all that. I think it's the other way around. I think he picks the spot, he works backwards from there, and then he has these creative folks create stories around it. Right?
That's also if he did them all that way, which he might not have.
Well,
I think he might have not have done.
I think that's the most logical way, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so if I think about a particular city, where would he want to be if there's some and I think maybe New York and San Francisco stand head and shoulders above, right? There are some iconic places like the Statue of Liberty that you would want to see and stop at. And oh, by the way, that's the universal symbol for immigrants. Like, how could he not put that in? But I'm just saying, like, you don't have that in Milwaukee. You don't have that in some of these other cities. But the cities that do, you kind of want to say, like, gosh, is this the right area that he would want to be? The thing about San Francisco, if you're up in GGP, you don't see any of this stuff that is super iconic and important to San Francisco. Alcatraz, the Fisherman's Wharf, and the Golden Gate Bridge. You miss all that up there. So I just think this from a big perspective.
No, the way I got San Francisco is
GGP.
You're out in the city, and you already see from the verse. You got a high perspective. Where are you going to get that from? You're going to get that from Candlestick Park, which is where he intended you to be. You could actually even go in there and visit it, but you can see Justice and Education for All to See, High Tower of 3. But basically, that baseball reference, eventually you'll figure out you're looking out in the park, and you go out in Golden Gate Park, and the oldest monument in Golden Gate Park is the ball thrower statue.
I just think it's order. I don't think people have really thought about it in this way, is that he's now abandoned. Think Byron, okay? Is he going to pass up on the world's most iconic bridge as all this history and also like, I think that's a lower probability than he's up in Candlestick. No disrespect. It's just when I put these together, like, you're competing against the Golden Gate Bridge, and does Candlestick hold up to that? I would say no. It doesn't. So
he's using the history of Candlestick because that's where the team moved from New York to San Francisco. Plus, he's using one of the most famous players that played for him. You even got to figure out that Monty Irvin that came to his apartment. He never played for San Francisco. Willie Mays did. Willie Mays is one of the top baseball players in the world, and the book mentions quite a few of them. But the general overall topic, like Chicago's the north of the Civil War, because Grant and Lincoln, the baseball players, the imagery, You just have to go there and figure out. And eventually you would, the book tells you, it might be in your backyard, public park, whatever, but you go there and you find out that the oldest statue in Golden Gate Park is that of a baseball pitcher, which the team spirits does nothing but talk about over and over. Fastballs, go over balls, curve balls. That's where you end up in the end, but you take this path through the city and air smells sweet, all that. It's just all, it's vague, but you can place it right in a baseball game. High posts are three high posts are your 2 foul poles and your pitcher's mound.
I would say, especially in San Fran, if you're not on the shoreline, you miss out on these must-see iconic features of the city. And so I think that's a lower probability to not be there, is my point. So now that's not true in some of these other cities where you can't say, oh, well, if I'm in Milwaukee, like this is where I, have to go. Sadly enough, right? It's not as iconic. So San Fran, you have to treat it, I think, a little differently. You have to think about the odds and what are the probabilities he's going to abandon Fisherman's Wharf, Alcatraz, the Golden Gate Bridge.
See, there's
I think that's a super low probability itself.
So there's stuff like this.
The opposite, honestly.
Yeah. So
that's the opposite.
Why
these obvious things are not what he wants. Because that's not what it is in the first 3 at all.
See, everything I got highlighted in green is all baseball. Every single thing is baseball. Now you see you see this imagery right here. Now, if we go to the back of book and we look up team spirits, so you're seeing imagery of New York and the Giants of San Francisco with the SF on his hat, which is also in the painting. But when you go to the team spirits on page 222, it says English, and that's because baseball comes from rounders. But then it says Alabama and Quebec. So Quebec was the first baseball team, and Alabama is Willie Mays.
how many? I'd say. So all I'm saying is, like, if you put the Golden Gate Bridge, if you put the Golden Gate Bridge up against Willie Mays or the Giants, the freaking Golden Gate Bridge for 7 billion people on the planet wins every time. Is all my point. So in San Francisco, especially, I do think you have a tall order to disregard those. Like, forget. And by the way, I've given you a great way to get up to the bridge from Fisherman's Wharf. But nonetheless, so that's the thing. Like in Chicago, Cleveland, and Boston. I mean,
how would he figure a dig spot using Golden Gate Bridge?
I mean, it's right there. It was wide open and wild. And
or how would it?
The problem. Here's the problem. The problem is
the Red Hot Chili Peppers over there.
There's matches everywhere, right? There's matches everywhere, right? There could be the woman herself as a statue in San Francisco somewhere, and unless you're following a path and started at a start, you're not going right. If you just jump to that statue, right, sure, that's just like the painting, you're not following the template, right? So for San Francisco, right, the start should be giant pole, giant step to the place the cast is kept. If you look, and it is talking about the image, right? So but
it says to the place. The place.
Listen,
giant pole, giant step.
Why would he start you where at the end of the verse?
To the place the cask
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it's not saying giant pole, giant step is where the cask is. It's saying giant pole, giant step to the place. So you're going somewhere else. So that's my point. Giant, San Francisco giant bat, San Francisco instead of step, bag, base, whatever. You that clues of there to go to the place the cast is kept. But when you got all these pitching references, it's baseball, and then you have football, hockey, whatever, and then you got all these baseball references under baseball. You don't have any quarterback throwing references. You don't have any hockey forward references. It's just baseball pitching is all it's talking about. And there's a statue in Golden Gate Park.
In San Francisco, this is where I do think it's a different puzzle, in that you have these massively iconic areas and visuals and places where you have to go. If you go to San Francisco, you must go at least and see Alcatraz with your own eyes. You've got to see the Golden Gate Bridge, okay? Some of these other cities, no. So I would tell you, yeah, I think in a way you have to be biased towards any of these particular cities where there is this iconic must-see stuff. And
you're thinking running north is across Golden Gate, right?
To not include those than you do to say, well, prove to me the Golden Gate Bridge. I think just naturally, San Francisco, that would be something he would want to feature. Okay, not so in Cleveland, not so in Chicago, but yeah, I too would argue in Charleston, this freaking boat, these like historic ships are something this guy in particular, because he's shown us he loves the military figures, ships, all that good stuff, because he's featuring them in all these different puzzles. That is that a spot that he would want to be? You better believe it. Now, is it really there? I don't know, right? But I'm just saying, like, you gotta like think what was the main attraction down there?
You can look in the verse.
You gotta let the image lead you. That's the problem. You have to start at the start, right? So you have to know how you read the verse. That's how you got to know how you read the verse, right? So after I did Charleston, I realized I get to the end of the verse, and that's the start. So look at San Francisco. The end of the verse.
I don't agree with that at all, by the way.
Well, look at what's your giant pole in the painting. What's giant pole in the painting? The giant pole is the cable pole, right? It's the cable car, right?
No.
Well, that's what it is, right? That's what it looks like.
The word giant is the biggest clue across the book, because it even connects to San Francisco with the Chicago American Giants Nigger League baseball team, and there's even imagery in the book of that. So
all that is right there at the Fairmount, right? So I believe so. You read the verse and he gets you to the start where it narrows down, right? But the end of it is also your start too when you first read it the first time, when you wed the verse to the image.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
What proof do you have that the end of the verse
Chicago
is actually the start?
Chicago. Brush and music hush, right? He wouldn't tell you where to dig and then give you brush and music hush, right? What is brush and music hush? Is brush and music hush lining you up somehow, right? Think about it. If you read M&B Set in Stone, you go all the way around and end up back at the Art Institute, which is right across the road from M&B Set in Stone, you would think it's there, not one line back or a couple lines back at 10 by 13, right? So he gives you 10 by 13 worth of dig, and then he tells you brush and music hush, because you're reading the verse the first time and you're getting to a start. You're getting to between the Art Institute right there. You got the railroad, right? So you have.
But why wouldn't you start these
hush and brush or railroad terminology?
First, line or two of the verse. Why would he put the start at the bottom? Where do we have proof that I've never heard that? You know what I mean?
Why would he? That's an addition to the verse. That it's mathematical, right? So you take the last line, which is brush and music hush. That's an addition, brush and music, right? So that's two things, right, that are added together, right? And they're two different locations, and you got the railroad in between, right? So brush and music hush, right? Talking about the library and the Art Institute, right? And then M&B is right there. So he gets you to the start, M&B Set in Stone, read it on around, and you end up 10 by 13 is your clue, right? So I
don't think that's how that puzzle was solved, is it?
It's not how it's solved, because they missed the Eichel, right? They don't know the Eichel, and JJP ain't going to tell you how the Eichels work. He's not going to tell you that.
Yeah,
right?
they don't
put that out on their own.
Rob always said,
I wish they were called something else, because I don't like that word for some reason.
What?
Eichel. I don't like that word, Eichel. I wish it was called something else.
Yeah.
It'd be more popular.
I can't even find a real good definition.
Sure.
It connects to a bunch of computer calendar stuff on Apple iPhone when you try to just search the definition of the word.
I just say Eichel because JJP said Eichel.
I
mean, it's a technique.
I didn't hear that.
He's known for hiding stuff in his paintings anyway, so I think he's really too good at it.
Yes.
Look at San Francisco. All right, the Eichel is mirrored, right? What's Giant Step mirrored? Giant Pets, right? And Giant Pets, to the place this cast is kept. A cast is a helmet, right? Well, do y'all know Wayne Smith? I know y'all got to know him, right? So Wayne Smith spot.
The guy who likes to steal other people's ideas, you mean?
He's never stole anything from me. Never, right? And the people that do say he did steal something from him, like he aggravated you about Fort Sumter House, right?
No, we pieced it up.
He's just pushing your buttons, right? That's
well, me and Wayne talked. We pieced it up, so
sweet.
I had some experience, but we were able to meet some.
That's not even his real name.
It was all right.
Yeah, Sean.
Yeah. So,
the important thing though
this spot is where they used to keep this bird.
The zoo spot.
So to the place the cast is kept, giant pet, to the place the cast is kept, to the place the bird is kept with the cast on its head, right? And that used to be
How do you get pet out of this?
What?
How do you get pet out of
Giant Step? What's step backwards?
He's spelling step backwards. PETS.
You mirror that line, and then the last line should have your Eichel. What's to the place the cast is kept, where they kept that bird? It's zoological, right? That's your Eichel. That gives Eichel to the dig site, right? He's either got the start or he's got the end, right? And I think he's got the end because it seems like it's a narrowed down path. It's not clues in the image. It's so confusing, right? Because giant pole, you look at that giant pole, that's clues in the image. You got the cable car, it's on the table. You got the F on the table, so it's somewhere around Fairmont, right? So I believe it's the cable car museum, because at the cable car museum, you have a giant pole sticking up out the top of it. Right?
That's another thing. I don't see the cable car in the table base.
Here,
I've heard that for years.
Yeah, it's there.
How do I send you?
There would have to be other imagery added to that to actually make it a cable car. You just can't go on the.
It's the silhouette, but that's the turnaround down at Powell and Hyde.
I mean, that would be a clue to San Francisco when you really think about it. That's what that would.
That represents the turnaround, Eric. When you go from Fisherman's Wharf over to Ghirardelli, you run right by the. What's that?
Where did Alan go? He's gone.
I think we lost him.
Dropped off. But yeah, that I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever been there to see that. But when I was mulling around and putting holes in the ground and stuff like that there, and I've been to San Francisco, but I've never seen that. It is freaking iconic and just the coolest thing you've ever seen, where they bring the trolley down, the cable car, and they put it on this saucer and they flip the thing around. And then that's how they turn it around, you know? So is that something like Byron-esque? And like, absolutely. And that's one of the things you see when you go from Fisherman's Wharf along the shoreline. So to me, that just makes a ton of sense. And would he want to feature something so cool and different and fun about San Francisco? You bet. So I
think if he featured the Golden Gate Bridge, that would just be too. That'd be like using Mount Rushmore.
But Eric, no one's there. It's up in GGP.
The same thing about the Statue of Liberty. Too iconic.
John Poundcar just talked about that stuff that he added, and he thought that would be. Byron said, "No, you got to cover that up. That's too easy."
Well, where's the Golden Gate Bridge?
Same thing.
Where's the Golden Gate Bridge in the painting? I mean, it's not obviously there. I can tell you it is. According to,
I mean, you could say the cliff's there.
The visuals.
The Golden Gate got its name from a Spanish map maker when they went by there anyway. He called it the Golden Gate, but they didn't go up in there.
But this guy, Byron, you you guys know, like, you got to get a sense for the guy when you read all this stuff, and like, would he leave out the bridge?
I think that would be something. Too many locals would know that.
But no one's there. My point is, like, 40 some years, I'm like the first guy to show a cohesive way to get up there. And that's like, that shouldn't be that way.
I think he would have a hell of a time digging any kind of hole up there because of that rocky cliff stuff.
I got some upcoming material coming for San Francisco, so I'm going to stay neutral right now on San Francisco.
Well, it's basically I attributed this. So all these words of the verse for Stonewall connects to baseball. High post of 3, ace, which is also a pitcher. The word high. Mark Twain and his love of baseball. Giant, which is the San Francisco Giants. You also see that in the imagery. Step pole, wordplay. And basically, when I said this is, smell, sounds from the skies, PA at a baseball game. The smell is the food. If you've ever been in a baseball game, you know what that is. Everybody gets stuck with the chocolate, but in your ball game, the sounds from the sky is the PA. That's where the speakers are, way up there. You could see everything from the bleachers.
This is my
point. At the time the book came out, this was, Candlestick's gone. Now it's Oracle Park, brand new park. And obviously he didn't bury it out there because it's private property. If by some chance he did, it's gone. But, Stonewall Jackson. You hear people talking about Stonewall Jackson, not that Stonewall Jackson. You're talking about Stonewall Jackson, the baseball player. Why he hides the Pete Rose in the lat. When Byron's hiding something, it's because it's super important. He hides Pete Rose, who at the time he was making the book was one of the most popular baseball players in the world, and he played for the Cincinnati Reds, which are the oldest team in Major League Baseball. These are important facts to baseball in San Francisco. Why mention Pete Rose? Why hide him backwards in Latin? I mean, you got to ask yourself that when they hide something, it's like the Timucuanan Indians for St. Augustine. He doesn't spell it properly. It's like you were talking about Harkin. Not spelled right.
Type in Harkin.
That's very important when you find that in the secret book. And usually you're looking it up on Google and you're like, this word doesn't. Google will give you that correction. I know it'll do that. If you take Harkin from the verse and put it into Google, and it'll show you the correct word when you say search.
So Eric, sorry, go ahead, Alan. Sorry.
I just sent a picture to our chat of the cable car and Wayne's location, right? So you can see that the cable car is the pole, right? And you can see that Step is mirrored at a spot, and you can see that image that I sent of the woman, the San Francisco woman herself, it's mirrored, right? It's already flipped around. And if you notice his location right there, it's mirrored. The hairline, how the hairline comes down, and it's got the 2 boxes. And the little archway where he thinks the cast is at is the same archway that the jewel has, right? So it to the place the cast is kept is got multiple meanings. From Fairmount, it means to go to Great Highway, or from Fairmount, or somewhere. I haven't done that much research on San Francisco, but wherever you think that the giant step is.
I had a guy call me on FaceTime. I think it was last year. He was at that same spot. There was pretty new construction there.
For San Francisco, what is the most iconic sound from the sky specific to San Francisco? And Eric, I know you're right. You're absolutely right on your baseball analogy. So my thing is for particularly San Francisco, but these other cities, you really have to ask yourself, what is specific to the city? Like Twain, how many different Twain connections are there? It's got to be something specific to San Francisco. It's more than
That's the Eichel line also.
You tell me,
that Twain helps you narrow it down.
1,000 people in San Francisco. What is the most iconic sound from the sky here? What would they all say?
Was it the Angels?
The
If you guys have never been to San Francisco, I can tell you the thing you hear all day long, all the time, are the horns from the bridge.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
So if it's not that,
some kind of
I
fog
don't
horn,
know
or
what it would be.
like
So to hear those fog horns, by the way, you have to be down on the shoreline. You can't be up in GGP or a Candlestick. No disrespect. I'm just saying, like, I'm looking at it saying, well, gosh, in San Francisco, what's the most iconic sound from sky? It's not an airplane or something else that could be anywhere. It's these freaking fog horns. I don't know if there's any place in the entire country.
Yeah, you wouldn't say the air smells sweet out there. You'd say the air smells salty.
Yeah, but it smells sweet at the chocolate factory.
Like
that takes up like a whole city block. I mean,
well, at the end of Twain's attention is the line you do the trick on. Y'all know Twain means double, right?
Yep, you're right about that.
It just means Mark Twain.
So that connects it.
Oh, Mark Twain is a reference to a depth from Riverboat days.
That connects it to the painting.
I agree with that because that means two.
Because Gemini is twins.
That has nothing to do with San Francisco.
Well,
I was there.
You do the trick on that line, and it means 2 feet.
Ding, ding, ding.
My point is, like, the clues should relate to the city. And it's probably something that's very specific, probably, maybe not, probably something very specific to that city.
I'll tell everybody this. There is so much baseball in this book that I want someone to prove me wrong. You can go.
What is have you asked Ben Eason about the baseball in Byron? Has anybody ever asked him? That'd be a good person to ask.
Well, let me put it this way. I do know that this photo right here. Okay, and now you gotta just look at the little bit of time this photo right here was taken in Byron's apartment. Now, Ben Eason said he wasn't a massive baseball fan, but this would have been about the timeline when 1957 is when they went from New York to San Francisco. Now, Monty Irvin did not go. He just actually Willie Mays just died a few months ago.
Yeah,
but Willie Mays went and played for the Giants. And I'm pretty sure he couldn't get Willie Mays to come. So Monty Irvin came to his apartment and Byron told him to wear that. Now, even with the ferry right there, you look at the ferry. So she's sitting on a baseball. And a baseball is just, it's just a nickname of the ball the sports use. Football, baseball, tennis, golf, whatever. And you can see that there's a direct connection that she's wearing ballet shoes, and you have to look at the history of ballet, that a lot of the major sports figures, especially baseball, they took ballet lessons to help with their balance and their speed, even though they kept it quiet. They don't want anybody to know they were taking ballet. But you look closely at the ferry, and there's a reason. See, this is what I was talking to Ben on the phone today. Ben Ason's taken this photo, and Byron has Monty Irvin come to his apartment, and Byron hangs his poster on the wall. This all has meaning, even though Ben Ason doesn't know what the hell it means. Hey, Ben, come over and take a photo. So, this is back like closer to the Negro League. And this, of course, is Monty Irvin 82. I think he died in 2016. But they all pay. The guy back here is the manager of the New York Giants. But the team, with the book, the Brooklyn Dodgers moved to L.A. same year that the New York Giants moved to San Francisco. So, but of course, when Mark Twain was there, Mark Twain even talked about once he moved to San Francisco, he was kind of bummed because they didn't have any baseball teams. And that's what he did most of the time in his pastime when he lived in Baltimore and stuff like that. But there's so much information just in this photo. Why is she wearing ballet shoes? She's a female. Wish I could see her face, but you see Joe Ellen You know, Joe Ellen's work here. There's a reason why Joe Ellen put her in a ballet. The Conquistador in St. Augustine. Look at his feet. He's totally out of uniform. He's wearing like leotards. That connects to Richard Wagner and the German.
Hey, Eric, where do you start? If you like candlestick area, where do you start? I mean, you've got these hands really pointing to these blocks, and like, where's your start?
Now, the clock's gonna apply to 6 when you get to the statue, but you're gonna use north. That's always been. I've had that for like 4 years. That's something I came up with. Is the I just call it the clock and compass theory. So you go 6. So, you know, say you come to the statue like this. So in Golden Gate Park, John F. Kennedy drives. You guys are John F. Kennedy Drive. Right up here, a little to the west is now Nancy Pelosi Drive. Across the street a little further is the Flower Conservatory. So when you come to the statue, and he's throwing this way. So this is north. You guys are north. South 6 is on the other side. That's where your cask is supposed to be.
Yeah, but I mean, this start, right? You have these hands in San Francisco pointing to these blocks in a very specific spot on the blocks. Where's your start? I mean, those hands are pointing to something, right?
Yeah, I've tried to place that. I mean, she's one hand's like this. You know, I was like, I was thinking for a while, is it a baseball pitch? The bases are all over her sleeves. This is the stuff. So it's Chinese because of Cuju. It's the first documented sport in history. This goes back to Ming Dynasty. Their ball was actually called a pearl. It wasn't called a baseball, tennis ball, golf ball. Their ball back then, which was a leather wrapped ball full of hair, was called a pearl. That was one of the 4 names it had. The women mostly played this for the emperor. This was actually a sport. Cuju was a sport that they actually had to ban like 100-something years ago because factory workers would go on lunch break playing it. And it started to disrupt. In China, it disrupted like business. They were like, okay, there's no more playing this crap. It's illegal now. The dragon, that's the most common baseball name all over the world. There's so many teams in Japan and China called the damn Dragons. It's a baseball team.
And the 3 and 9 on the table, that's baseball also.
What are all those scales inside the dragon? I mean, those have to represent something, right?
Well, down there at the very bottom of the tail, you got the 6. That connects to the. It helps you connect the verse, I believe.
Well, look at those scales right inside there. There's got to be something to those scales, no? I mean, I don't think it's just scales.
They look like a bunch of baseball bags. That's all I see. So G and L. Okay, so with the G and H, Ghirardelli, yeah, but games, hits. Baseball uses just like a 1-letter abbreviations. 1, 2, 3. The 3 positions of baseball. That's the catcher, the pitcher, first base. That's the 3. They're in Roman numerals because baseball's never used them. It's a football thing. So when you search Roman numerals to baseball, it just tells you the history is the baseball never used them. It's a football thing. I'll tell you what, this book print is so crappy, it's ridiculous. I mean, you got basically a field with a dot in the middle that would be represent home plate. There's just so much stuff in there.
The G to me means the GH to me means Great Highway because it says to the place the cast is kept, right? And that's the end of the earth. And in the painting, because you're going on the path, you're going by clues in the painting. And in the painting, the jewel is above GGP, right? And it's got that GH there. So Great Highway. So it's saying, to me, I don't know much about San Francisco. To me, it's saying to the place the cast is kept, talking about in the painting, and go to Great Highway. Take the cable car to Great Highway or something like that.
There could be a multitude of ways I mean, without Byron actually being here to explain like every detail, I mean, that's
why
we can only do what we can do with clues.
Template, that's why you got to stick to a template and find a start and not move until the image tells you to move. Because at that point, all your clues are in the image. And then you'll see your clue in the image, and then at your location, it should be there. Like the very end being the ickle and it being the table, right? And you got the F on the table, and the pole is the cable car. So it could be the museum, and then it says giant step that could be Hop, right? The Mark Hopkins, right? So cable car, Mark Hopkins. What's the next line? To the place Cass is kept. Get on the cable car and take it to Great Highway. Right?
Yeah.
So my only thing with that, Alan, and this speaks to like some of the points I was trying to make. If you showed people this backwards GH and you said, what does this represent? And you went to San Francisco, I'm telling you, not a single person would say Great Highway. They would say Ghirardelli. It's where people go and see a sign from backwards that is so prominent.
Well, it's Ghirardelli, because Ghirardelli, like in the back of the book, when you see Native Americans, the front of the book tells you that the fairies were not naive enough to call the Indians they encountered Native Americans, because that term's been offensive forever to the tribes. So when you see Native Americans, that means it's something native to America, like the Civil War, baseball, something like that. Mark Twain's writings. You know, he didn't travel from abroad to here. He's not an immigrant. He was born here. So the Adventures of Tom Sawyer is a Native American thing, is what you're calling it. And that's more deception, where they're trying to make you think that means Indians. This is why you got to read the book and go, oh, okay, so I'm not supposed to call them Native Americans. But if you look in the back of the book look at the California stories, they're all bookends. So you got the West Coast Ghost is California, but the Werner von Brownie is Florida, Texas, and California. So Florida, California, both ends of the country. Then you got Mirachama, Greek, and the Greek go all the way back to the games. And you have California, New York as your areas of concentration. And then the last one was New Jersey, California, of the Teen Angels, which of course is about music and all that. It says Native American right there. Area of concentration is Native American, because that's because of the 50s, 60s suicidal Romeo and Juliet style music that I had to ask my aunt about that, but it got so bad on the radio. Every song was about this boy and girl that fell in love, and then he got splattered on the road in some car race.
Good song.
But Teen Angel is an actual song by, I can never remember that guy's name. But pretty soon they stopped making these songs because the radio station said, we're not playing that shit. Don't send us no more of that crap.
Hey, Eric, could you
romanticizing death and stuff like that.
Could you put that slide up?
Do what?
I'm sorry. Could you put that slide up that I'm showing?
Yes.
I'm looking for that song, by the way.
By Mark Denning.
That's it. Mark Denning. His sisters were the Denning sisters. Actually, one of his sisters, they were a very famous trio, and they wrote that song for him.
It was written by Gene Denning?
Yep.
Is that it?
Yeah, geez.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 70s, so I had no idea about that. You know, it's just like the same crap when James Dean got hit head on. You know, there was all that, oh my God, I was in love with him, you know, forever young. You know.
All right, so if I could for a second. So if you want to know how this ties to the Chinese were huddled into the Presidio. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this is it, but I'll tell you, it's pretty compelling, because if you look at the history of the Chinese, when the earthquake happened in 1906 and the fires, they were forced into, and Eric, you talked about this earlier, these different pods of people in Boston and all that. Same thing here. when you talk about a historic event in San Francisco, not just Chinatown, but what were the Chinese doing there and what's some of their history? They were all huddled in, well, everyone was huddled into two parks. They were huddled into GGP and they were huddled into the Presidio. The Chinese were all huddled against their will to the far west side of the Presidio. So I would argue to you, this is a big nod, the dragon, and these scales aren't just scales. They represent this very historic event. So if you put GGP up against the Presidio, I would tell you from a Chinese history perspective, you would never choose GGP over the Presidio, okay? Because that's not where the history happened. It happened in the Presidio. So if you like Battery Lancaster like I do, that's in the Presidio. So I don't know. I haven't seen somebody explain.
Yeah, but see, here's how I look at this. This might just be distraction. You do learning a lot of history about a lot of cities that really doesn't have anything to do with the puzzle. And when you get to the end of that research, you figure that out.
Look at how big this is and prominent.
But I agree. I see what you're saying.
I don't know how
exactly
it can be
what it could mean.
I think
that should tell
If the air smells sweet there, you know what that sweet smell is.
That's down at
It might be that too.
That's down at Ghirardelli. All right, so all I'm saying is like, okay, I found this because I was just digging around, whatever, but it seems to make sense, doesn't it? I don't know what
you gotta follow a path.
They look
like no.
This is one of the techniques of the book that is used. These wandering off. You're on the path, and you come down and you come across this information, and you're like, do I keep going this way or do I need to go this way? You'll go that way, and you'll go, oh shit, I should have never went this way.
This is another
At
reason.
the end, you come right back where you started. You keep going.
The reason why
But you can't. The image will not. That you do not move until the image tells you to move, right? And that's what took me a long time to understand.
I don't agree with
I can tell you that. I tell you that.
No,
you're not understanding what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'll see if I can help here, Alan. Because you're talking about the mirror reversing and stuff, but you can see the G and H is being backwards. Is that what you're confused about?
Yeah, all the clues for San Francisco are mirrored. So the trick is mirrored.
Because the G's back, when you're looking at the painting, you got to use a mirror to get the G and the H the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So people are also doing that with the verse as well.
Yes.
I don't remember what the hell. I remember I took a black light.
One line in the verse and do the trick on one line in the verse.
Yeah.
And you have to do
that would be a
icon.
whole genre of.
You have to do the trick to get to the end. You have to do the trick on your path. If you don't, you'll never get to the end.
That's like the guy that was doing the anagrams. I'm like, I'll just let him do that. That's like, I'm not about to get. He's like,
if I would have known from the start, I would have never took on this.
So see, Stonewall. Okay, let's look at Stonewall in the verse. Stonewall is an obvious connection to the Stonewall riots in New York because they actually occurred. The blast back was, New York. It was the police raiding a gay nightclub and arresting a bunch of people. I forgot what it was called. Stonewall riots broke out, but they also broke out in San Francisco too because people were pissed. Okay, San Francisco today, and I remember a couple years ago, the oldest lesbian club in San Francisco, it might have been last year, the year before, had just closed. The owner said nobody really, I guess the internet is too busy, so nobody really wants to go to the bars anymore. So San Francisco's never hid. New York's never hid their, gay community, Greenwich Village, all this other stuff. The Bay Area. So that's a definite connection. That is San Francisco. And that also is a bookend, New York, San Francisco, just like the baseball team.
That's pretty.
You're going to have multiple meetings back and forth on these.
Okay, so just by the way, she's pointing to there's 38 or 39 blocks in the cuff sleeves. That's the start of Fisherman's Wharf, by the way. It happens to be Pier 38. Now she's pointing in between the three and the 4, and the 4. So she's basically pointing to 43 and a half. Guess what sits down at pier 43 and a half? Okay. How many half piers do you know? This is sitting down at pier 43 and a half.
That might be pointing you to your start point. But
absolutely. So
Alan, does it have giant pole, giant step?
So Alan, I want to wind this back to what you're talking about. This is the start. I don't know how it can't be. It's just such a cool connection. And by the way, it's Fisherman's Wharf. It's not some obscure area of San Francisco nobody knows of. It is like, it's Fisherman's Wharf, okay? So this is the start, but where is the end? It's actually...
The whole verse has got to be talking about the start. If you're standing at the start, the whole verse, except for the trick lines, should be telling you where you're at the start. Right.
All right, hey, gonna give everybody a heads up. We got 4 minutes, and we're gonna have to get off here. We're at 2 hours 26 minutes right now.
Well, in any case, you end up.
Everybody, just finish up what you want to say. Make your points.
So this is where you end up. You end up at this arch with a big view of this very historic arch that saved Fort Point. That trellis and all the engineering you see there was not needed in the bridge. It was needed to save the fort. So you start at it in the shoreline solve, at least you start at Fisherman's Wharf at this super iconic ferry arch, which is a stone wall door for sure, and you end up at an arch as well. So I think that just lends like, gosh, it just seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, I see how it could be connected. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past John Palancar, the way he manipulates stuff. That, I mean, gate's even in there. Stonewall, is it Stonewall door or gate? In the verse,
Stonewall's door.
So door could be wordplay. He could really mean gate. I mean, hell's that word could be, that entire thing could be just wordplay for Golden Gate.
Anyway, so I just wanted to show you that is yes, there in San Francisco at least there's a start at this big historic arch at Pier 43 and a half, which is odd to begin with, and then you end at this very historic thing. And it's like, would Byron want you to see that right next to the Golden Gate Bridge? Like, I think he would.
The thing is, like, with my theory, I never came across anything about that I remember about Ghirardelli chocolates, the pier, Golden Gate Bridge, anything. First thing I got into was I actually looked at the imagery. I said, okay, so why are these guys all in baseball? She's sitting on a baseball. The ferry is. She's female. And, I was looking at the picture of my magnifying glass, and I'm like, some reason she's wearing ballet shoes. That's where I pretty much started.
Yeah.
And the stuff in the book, the 3 stories in the book, you got one, the Warner von Brownie, that's about NASA. That's Berkeley. That's Ames Research. Houston, Texas, Cape Canaveral, Florida. Teen Angels is about music, and you got just a bunch of imagery about, if you're doing music and recording music, you're not in San Francisco, you're in LA.
Hey, Eric, what are the other fair folk stories that you think relate to SF? I'm just curious.
Other fair folk, let's see, I got a few of them written down in the back. Okay, good question. Anyone that's English, any book story that's English, there's a clue in there, and I know a few of the other stories. If you look in there, you'll see a sports baseball reference just in the middle of a bunch of random stuff. The stories in the book are like that. They'll start talking about the ferries and blah blah blah, and they'll say like ferry just leaned on back and threw a slider. It's thrown in there just like that. So I just go in there. What word in here has got anything to do with baseball? Boom, there it is. That's how you confirm stuff. But then any
story that is focused on Asian culture, right, would probably necessarily be related.
Yeah. The baseball's also hidden behind with that, because I think in the back of the book it actually says it doesn't say China. That's the other way. That's the other way Byron's hiding it. You got to actually figure out that it's so Chinese. See, in like the Warner von Brownie, how it says Chinese European. That European's different, but there's your Chinese right there, and it says California. the European. Okay, so this is Europe. This is like saying Asia. So with California, the area of concentration, it's Chinese, British, and for Florida, we already know Florida's Spanish, so the Chinese ain't in play, and the European is German. When you see, could you notice all these countries? They'll say English, Scottish, French, and then you'll get to some of these. It'll say Roman. You get a few of these suckers, and they'll say Middle Eastern. That's a big area. What country? You got to figure that out. High interest rate says European. Norris, you got to look that up if you don't even know what that is. The glitches say Asian. How many Asian countries are there? So also with the baseball, and the vanishing doesn't really even tell you that you're looking for Chinese. It just talks about shiny people and stuff. So you got to figure it. And I just assumed the shiny stuff was silk. But when you get into, I was like, it's all hidden. It's all. And then when you get to team spirits, you're like, what the heck is? What does baseball have to do with Alabama and Quebec? So Quebec is Montreal, Quebec, where the Expos first went. And Alabama is not only where Willie Mays is from, it's also where the oldest baseball stadium in America is.
In Alabama.
In
A
Alabama.
lot of Civil War history at that stadium.
Yeah, it's an old stadium back from the Negro League days. It's still there today. And I was like, wow, really? And I guess because, progress and development, like Polo Grounds in New York, that's where the Giants used to play. That was long torn down. People actually tried to save that at one time, and they said, nah, the land's worth too much money.
They still use that baseball field in Alabama.
That's right. They sure do.
I would never.
They do historical games there. But that's also shows you how Alabama, that story of Alabama also connects to Chicago and the Negro Baseball League. Chicago also connects to Charleston with the music and the verse of Chicago. That's jazz. Not New Orleans. Chicago's mostly where that started. That's like the other week.
There was a baseball riot in Charleston at Marion Square.
Yeah. That could be part of it too. But it's like you just got to keep going through all this history and go. And, eventually you're taking the verse and the imagery of the poem because it's every single one of the paintings. It's just vague. It's talking about tall trees.
All interpretation.
You got to look at base. You got a tree. Okay, if it's not that tree with green leaves outside my house, what other kind of trees are there? What else is called a tree?
It's logical solving.
Hey, I've got a question for Douglas. Douglas, you're working on San Francisco, you said?
Yeah. I don't have anything yet, but I was listening to all the stuff you guys said. See, that factors in. I try to satisfy other people's theories and mine existing at one time.
Anybody feel free to go through my theory. It's very easy to follow, but it's like you're looking for that topic, and it's all talking about.
I read from some guy who didn't think the book had anything in it for the thing. The book eventually, coincidentally, is there.
Yeah. Right. It's because if you come across any clue, like say you look at something in the painting and you go, or say that in Chicago, say someone other than Rob and them in Chicago's, say a guy said, man, I was in Chicago one time and I remember seeing that. That was the water tower. When he Googled or went to the library in 83 or today Googled it, he would say, oh, hell yeah, that is the water tower. Boom, he'd be there. The research requires that. Or say, he didn't know it was in the book and he looks and says, hey, what big monuments are in Chicago? I think this is Chicago. Water tower. There's the water tower right in the painting. So you got to go through that history. The fire history of Chicago connects to Houston. There's a water tower in both paintings. That's one thing you got to look at. There's a water tower in both paintings for Chicago and Houston. And if Grant and Lincoln, which are both, it was buried in Grant Park. Lincoln's in the verse, and they're the president and the commanding general of the north of the Civil War. Houston is the south of the Civil War, and you just basically you can't tell the story to the north without telling the story to the south, and that's also Byron's favorite war. when it comes to history, Civil War. So he made 2 puzzles out of it.
All these.
I mean, it's as simple as that.
The batteries in New York, the batteries in San Francisco, the ships.
Yeah, Chuck Knapp's doing a good job. Like when I saw the wheel, the wheel in the Milwaukee painting, Milwaukee. Okay, mill wheel, but basically it's a concrete wheel. So go back to the caveman. Wheel square, too hard to pull. Now wheel round. Okay, wheel. What did it turn into? Motorcycles. You got Harley Davidson in Milwaukee. You got Nash Daimler in Milwaukee. The book tells you about going over to Detroit, area concentration to Detroit. Milwaukee might be that puzzle that it just takes you to the wrong damn city at first, and then you figure out you got to go to Detroit, Michigan. That's a possibility for Milwaukee. Start in Milwaukee, end up in Detroit.
I believe Milwaukee is the puzzle.
That's what I'm starting to think, because the German of the automobiles. So if you look at the wheel in the Milwaukee painting and you go to the American Motor Gremlins, the fairy on the ground is looking right at the wheel. And I went, American Motor Gremlins. So that's American Motor Car Company, started by Daimler and Nash, and they made the Gremlin. And where were they when they did that? Racine, Milwaukee, that area. And the first car made in America, the first car made was by Carl Benz in Germany. The first car made in America was made in Massachusetts. So there's something, and you notice in the Boston painting, you also see what behind her. Now, if the spears can be O's, they could also be wheels too.
Uh-oh.
See?
You're saying drive across country, do a big road trip?
Well, to find a box, to find a perfect box, you use circles.
Or that clue would just put you in Massachusetts. You'd go, this is a state of the secret. If you figured out that the American Motor Gremlin was American Motor Cars and their AMC Gremlin automobile. But see, but the beer's also connected in Milwaukee to the Germans. In Milwaukee, I have Scottish, which is going to be also Irish because they go hand in hand in the secret book. Mm-hmm. So you have German by itself. I don't know what the second fairy. So Nash and all them, they're all Brits. So German, British, Irish, Scot. There's 2 pairs. Like this. We'll leave everybody with this. This is going to be the last thing, and then I'll have to cut this off. Okay, so the 3 stories of Mitchell. Michelin is also Mitchell. Now, Michelin makes tires, but Michelin, the same company that makes tires, is also responsible for the Michelin rating at restaurants.
Mitchell equals Michelin? Is that what you said?
Michelin is French for Mitchell. So when he says there's 3 stories of Mitchell, and then you see all the crap in the book about Michelin, tires, mill wheel, the German, the car had to have wheels on it too, right? The Michelin company comes out of France, but the Michelin star rating for restaurants, the tire company came up with that too. It's the same damn entity.
Interesting. Mitchell is Michelin in French.
Yep.
You see how Boston words Expedophon or whatever it says and all, it was at the Cleveland, and then it was in Boston start, right? So for Charleston, I think Milwaukee is before Charleston, right? And I passed 3 stories of Mitchell on my path to Marion Square. And
is he doing wordplay with the Mitchell? Or is it the 3 stories of Michelin? Because people got to look at this too, because the book kind of tells you that you need the second fairy, but what puzzle was it? Oh, so Greek gardens, Greek Italian. That was your 2 fairies plus the African fairy. And I don't think you need the other one, but it was Greek, and that's where it was found. So in Cleveland, you didn't even need the second fairy, even though the book says you do. They do everything in pairs or 2s, but that does not necessarily mean you need them, because there's imagery in the painting of the little lion's head that's in the Italian garden, but it's Greek and it was put in the Greek garden. So he used all Greek. that's where it was buried. And I just assume it's just I think it's just about the history of gardens, because the garden Goyle, Greek gardens is where it was found. Then you had the garden Goyle story. Garden, there's the word used again, and that's where it was a Saharan planter is basically what that's called. It's where the cast was buried. That's an invention that African slaves brought from Africa, and basically it's a walled-in raised garden. So that's where it's buried. So that story of the garden Goyle basically just tells you to look in a planter for the cast. But is it in everyone that uses the African ferry? Is that going to apply that's where the cask is? That could be the case in New Orleans, St. Augustine. Wasn't the case in Chicago or Boston. But if your park has a planter, more than likely that's where it's going to be buried. It'd be a lot easier for Byron to bury it there too. So that's legit. All right, we're at 2:41. We're going to get off here, and next month, second Wednesday of next month, we will be back. And I want to give appreciation to Douglas, Mark, and Alan for coming on here tonight. And I'm tired, dude.
Good stuff.
This time flies by, man, when we come on. I'm just like, we're going to do this to 10. And I'm like, oh my God, it's what the hell time is it? It's almost 11. So, Hey guys, appreciate y'all being on, and everybody on YouTube. Thanks for watching.
Hey, check out the DCCR page. There you go.
Okay, go ahead, Davis. Go ahead, pitch it.
Yeah.
Hey, go to the CCR page and look for the algorithm. Look for other fun stuff on there.
Right.
I don't talk too much, so.
Hi, guys. All right.
Adios, amigos.
Go ahead. I told him not to cop out on his own. He did anyway. All right, guys. Y'all have a good night.
All right, thanks, man.